The People's Channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying gloomy for the rest of today. Low cloud and drizzle extensively. Some brighter spells, mostly to the north and northwest of higher ground because of the wind direction. Technical term for this weather, anticyclonic gloom. That's where low cloud gets trapped under high pressure and it stays in the same place for days on end, and that is indeed what we're seeing, with very little sun strength this time of year to lift the cloud. So the cloudy skies continue into the evening and overnight. Some clear spells continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps North Wales. Where that happens, temperatures dipping close to freezing, a few fog patches, but otherwise it's grey skies remaining and lows of 7 to 9 Celsius. Some drizzle about first thing Friday, especially across western parts of the country. So Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Wales. We'll see some hill fog and quite misty conditions in places. But the overcast skies continue effectively for much of the country. A few brighter spells there for northern parts of Northern Ireland and more especially northern Scotland. One or two fog patches in the glens, but they'll lift soon enough. And actually it's northern Scotland where we'll see the lowest temperatures first thing and then the highest temperatures by the afternoon because of the sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine there for northern Scotland for much of the day. We'll see some cloud breaks developing across northern England, southern Scotland, North Wales once again, but for the vast majority we keep the low-lying cloud, and it's going to feel a bit colder, I think, compared with Thursday, so 10 to 13 Celsius unless you get some sunshine, and then it's mid-teens. Into the evening, and it's more of the same effectively. One subtle difference is we'll see a bit more patchy rain arrive into the west, and actually we will see some rain crossing the country through the weekend, but that will clear the skies for Monday.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
A very good afternoon to you. Well, Donald Trump's been the president for 24 hours and the world is still spinning. It's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Today, Keir Starmer is in Hungary negotiating deals with Balkan nations to stop illegal immigration, help to return criminals. But will this come at a price? Because it will have to be vetoed by the European Union's Ursula von der Leyen. Might this be another Brexit surrender in disguise? And Donald Trump has promised to wage a war on woke. The next US president will end trans rights in sport and boot out diversity and inclusion hires. So, is the writing on the wall for woke? We'll have a war on woke debate, and that one is going to get spicy. Now, at 4 p.m. today, Joe Biden will address America with his hugely anticipated presidential loser speech. On such occasions, it's traditional to congratulate the winner, but will Biden say well done to Donald Trump, his nemesis, or, like Kamala Harris, will Biden be yet another sore liberal loser? And armed forces veterans are furious that on Remembrance Sunday this weekend, pro-Palestine protests have also been planned in Birmingham, Liverpool, Bath and in Ireland. I'll be joined by a GB News viewer, a Special Forces veteran who was almost killed in action, who thinks the mob, well, they just need to take a day off. And that's all coming in your next hour. Well, it's a show. Always a pleasure to have your company. Hasn't it been the most astonishing outburst, this tantrum, this wave of liberal hysteria since Donald Trump got in? It's almost been like a funeral in the mainstream media across the board. People are simply losing their minds. What is it about liberals? They just don't know how to lose. Joe Biden's going to speak at 4 o'clock today. Will he be gracious in defeat, or, like Kamala Harris, yet another sore loser? Let us know your thoughts, and also on those contentious protests, pro-Palestine protests on Remembrance Sunday. Is nothing sacred? Send your views in by going to gbnews.com/your say. But now here's your news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Very good afternoon. It's just gone 3 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill with your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. Our top story, the interest rate's been cut by 0.25 percentage points, 0.25 percentage points, only the second reduction in almost 4 years. The Bank of England cut the interest rates from 5% to 4.75%. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says we need to make sure inflation stays close to target, so we can't cut interest rates too quickly or by too much. The bank cut rates for the first time in August when inflation fell to its 2% target. It was then in September, as the bank wanted to see further evidence that inflation would be sustainably lower. The pound got a boost after interest rates were cut to 4.75%. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said with interest rates on a downward path, the Labour government is a world away from the last parliament.
It's welcome news for millions of homeowners and businesses that interest rates have been cut today to 4.75%. I do, though, recognise that for many people who took out mortgages a few years ago, they're still looking at higher rates because of the spike in interest rates after the Conservative mini-budget 2 years ago.
Cheshire Police say MP Mike Amesbury has been charged with common assault following an incident in Frodsham. A video emerged of him appearing to punch a man to the ground. According to the police, the 55-year-old is set to appear in magistrate's court at a later date. The charge relates to reports of an assault on a 45-year-old man in Frodsham, which was reported to the police on the 26th of October. More on this story as we can bring it to you. Sir Keir Starmer is set to sign a deal with Balkan nations to target people smuggling gangs as he heads to Hungary for the 5th EU summit. 46 European leaders will discuss issues including economic security, as well as migrant concerns. The Prime Minister will announce UK plans to clamp down on organised immigration crime abroad by signing new agreements with Serbia, North Macedonia and Kosovo. Meanwhile, the summit will also address Donald Trump's win as the bloc focuses on how to accommodate the country's 47th president. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride praised the special relationship between the UK and the US. He also told GB News the government needs to take defence spending more seriously.
Definitely in an era now where the peace dividend that we had after the end of the Cold War has sadly come to an end, and we're in much more dangerous territory. You can see that around the world, not just with Ukraine and Russia, but where China is in respect of Taiwan and North Korea and Iran and so on. And what we therefore need to do is to make sure we have that strong commitment to defence. Now, as a party, of course, we set out a clear path to increasing our expenditure on defence to 2.5% of GDP by 2030. And what we really need to see from this government is a similar clarity of commitment.
Sir Keir Starmer has telephoned Donald Trump to offer what Downing Street describe as hearty congratulations for his win. Sir Keir said he looks forward to working closely with the President-elect across all areas of the special relationship. The Prime Minister also reflected on the crisis in the Middle East and underscored the need for regional stability. And the UK has announced 56 new sanctions against Russia, including against Salisbury poisoning suspect Denis Sergeev. It's the biggest Russian sanctions package for 18 months, in a signal of support for Ukraine. The Foreign Office says the sanctions will directly target the supply of goods to Russia's military and constrain vital resources crucial to conduct Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
Beautiful, thank you, Sophia. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is in Budapest in Hungary today for the European Community Summit, where he's expected to sign deals with several Balkan nations as part of his plans to smash the people smuggling gangs. But overshadowing the agenda today seems to be the issue of how far the newly elected US President Donald Trump will support Ukraine. Well, let's speak now to the GB News Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. Now, let's start with the Balkans deal. These deals have merit, don't they? We did a previous deal, the Conservatives did, with Albania. Overnight, it more or less stopped the numbers of Albanians coming illegally to Britain. They're a good idea.
Yes, there's no doubt. I think this is more over law enforcement cooperation, though. The Balkans route into Europe is a key land route that's used by people smugglers. We know, of course, about the Mediterranean routes that send these boats over from North Africa into the Italian island of Lampedusa, other Italian islands, Greek islands and Spanish islands, on their way into Europe itself. But the Balkans route is of great concern as a land corridor, and the UK wants to enter into more meaningful criminal investigations alongside their partners in North Macedonia, Serbia and Kosovo, and this agreement would help them do that, to perhaps take the lead in some of these investigations. All, of course, moving towards the goal that Keir Starmer sees of smashing the gangs. But it's a tough ask because there are so many countries involved, and these are just the countries on the fringes of the European Union, but there are countries as well further upstream where the migrant crisis begins, the source countries, where it will be much more difficult to get agreements with some of these often dysfunctional regimes.
And the subtext of this, Mark, is that Serbia, North Macedonia and Kosovo, they're being groomed for European Union membership. Ursula von der Leyen, who was there, she would very much like them to have those nations within the circle of trust. And my point here is that these kind of deals could come at a price. But moving on from that, Ukraine seems to be overshadowing events because, of course, Donald Trump has been elected the president of the USA. No doubt that's gone down like a cold croissant at this summit. But, of course, they'll be very much concerned about what that means because Donald Trump, he wants to end this in a way that might not be to the European Union's pleasing.
Well, yes. I mean, these European political summits were set up in response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine to try to bring these European nations, both inside the European Union and outside the European Union, to act as one, to really have strength and resolve and to show support to Ukraine. We know that President Zelensky is over for the summit as well and will hold bilateral meetings. But there is real concern about what happens going forward. Does Donald Trump pull the US government's funding for Ukraine? It's the biggest supporter of Ukraine, despite the setbacks of late when there was a very significant delay in getting arms shipments to Ukraine. That had actually a significant effect on the battlefield and allowed Russia to make some key advances. Now, I don't think anyone seriously thinks that Europe could go it alone here. The UK and Germany are the biggest European donors to Ukraine, but you've got another big donor in Germany that's in pieces at the moment with the collapse of the coalition government of Olaf Scholz. So they're going to be a bit preoccupied at the moment. The last thing they want is to figure out how on earth they continue to keep supporting Ukraine in a powerful and meaningful way if Donald Trump does decide, as part of his efforts to try to persuade Zelensky around the negotiating table with Vladimir Putin, that key to that will be the withdrawal of funding if Zelensky doesn't comply.
And perhaps, as always, this is about power. If Donald Trump goes in there and brokers a deal to end this war, it would make the European Union look rather redundant, won't it, Mark White? Thank you very much for joining us on the show. Look forward to speak to you again, no doubt, in the next hour. And joining us now to continue this chat is the former advisor to Yvette Cooper and the crime commentator Danny Shaw. Danny, welcome. We're trying to get you up. Danny, welcome to the show.
I can hear you, I can see you.
Danny is with us now. Danny, welcome to the show. So I think these kinds of bespoke deals with Balkan nations, they're a good idea, right? I mean, we can all agree that reaching out to our international partners to try and stop people smuggling coming into Britain by going further downstream, these ideas have merit. What's your take?
Absolutely. I think this is all part of a step change in approach by the new government to try to forge international cooperation to tackle the channel crossings. We did see some agreements under the previous regime. We saw a deal with Albania and there were various other deals as well. But I think we're seeing a different approach, and I think international leaders, particularly in Europe, are really welcoming the new government, Keir Starmer's approach and so on. He's trying to make this, front and centre of the European Union sort of priorities, and to say this is a global problem. It's not just a UK problem. We all need to work together. We need international efforts to deal with this. It's too late when those boats are launched off the northern France coast. It's too late. It's got to be tackled upstream, and that means a multitude of countries playing their part.
But Danny, these treaties need to have proper teeth, don't they? So on the one hand, it could be let's have more cooperation with these nations, which could mean like £500 million that we give to the French. It could mean sharing of data, which might mean surrendering of things in return to them. Or it could mean an Albania-style deal where we simply return anybody coming from any of these nations. And by the way, Kosovans are 9 times more likely to be jailed in Britain than Brits. So will this kind of deal, do you think, have the teeth of Albania so we can say, no, Kosovo is a safe country, Macedonia is a safe country, Serbia is a safe country. Anybody coming to Britain illegally via those countries, we're going to simply send you home straight away.
I don't think the deals that are being agreed with North Macedonia, Serbia and Kosovo are really about returning people to those countries who come to the UK, because those numbers are vanishingly small. That's not really the issue. The same with foreign prisoners. The issue is to share information and intelligence and expertise with those countries so that their law enforcement experts and officials and prosecutors can swoop on the gangs and intercept them and intercept supplies before they're further across Europe. That's really what it's about. And if they get in return some training from UK experts, some intelligence to tackle their own crime issues, then that's great for those countries and they'll welcome it. In return for that, we hopefully will see some of these gangs thwarted in their tracks. That's what it's about, Martin. It's not really about returning people to those countries.
OK, super. So thanks for joining us on the show. And that's the former advisor to Vivek Cooper and crime commentator Danny Shaw. Thank you very much. And I'm joined now by the former Minister for Immigration, Kevin Foster. Kevin, welcome to the show. Delighted to have your company. Now, I'll put it to you again. These kind of deals sound great on paper. Let's have more cooperation, but they need teeth. It's not enough, do you think, at this point, just to share information, because we've been doing that for years. We literally have been doing that for years, and the problem carries on. What we actually need to do, I think, is something like is happening in Germany, and that is if illegal immigrants are crossing into Germany, they say, well, where did you come from? And when we find out where you come from, we send them back to those nations. So this problem gets sorted out at source. Do you have any faith in what's being brokered today as in any way tackling the immigration problem into Britain?
Well, I think, Martin, as you touched on, these type of agreements aren't unwelcome, to share information or to try and identify criminals. I'd also hope they would include something that says own nationals being returned, i.e. Serbia and Montenegro, because one of the problems we have is not just those countries we can't deal with, like Taliban-controlled Afghanistan or Assad Syria, but countries that just refuse to take their nationals back or are very slow in agreeing to do so. So let's hope that's in there, because that deals with the point you've made around Kosovans, for example. But just having intelligence sharing, it'll help, but it isn't fundamentally going to change the situation in the Channel, because many of the those arriving are from countries like Afghanistan, Syria, where in reality, to actually try and return to those countries is the challenge. And even in the German example you gave, yes, there are some countries. I think certainly we should look at the German example who have been able to return. I think they've recently have returned some people to Afghanistan. But even they will find there are countries that just will not accept the returns. And that's why third country agreements, Germany's starting to look at process potentially in Rwanda, Italy looking at a deal with Albania, and genuine resettlement of those travelling through safe and democratic countries to others does need to be looked at. You do actually need an answer to that fundamental question: what do you do with someone when you decide they shouldn't be in your country, or they've come here from another safe and democratic country to effectively choose to claim asylum here when they could have perfectly easily have done so in the country they left?
And isn't that the point? The Balkans, of course, are a gateway to the Middle East. It's that landway through, short hop over to Italy by sea, and then bang, you're in the Schengen area, and it becomes a European Union problem. And nobody seems to try and stop them as they wander across God knows how many European Union member states and they end up on the coast of France, and then they become our problem, and we seem utterly toothless to deport them. Isn't the answer to try and prove where these people came into the European Union, where they first landed, and say, right, this guy here, he came in via Kosovo, we're going to send him back to Kosovo because you didn't control your borders. Why should it be our problem? Here you go, have them back.
Well, that would be the ideal scenario with a returns agreement. But Martin, you'll remember sometimes people cite the Dublin arrangements in the EU that in theory mean you can return people to the first country they entered to claim asylum. The problem is you couldn't return people to Italy and Greece, and you'll realise anyone looking at a map will work out what the problem that brought was in terms of where people were likely to have entered the EU first. So yes, in the ideal world, a returns agreement back to the country they have just left. In our case, that would be, for example, returning people straight to France, perfectly safe, democratic. There's no war you need to flee in France. But it's then comes the real politics of trying to get a deal like that agreed. And if a country, for example, President Macron, just doesn't want to agree a deal like that, or if he did, it would come with a very high price for doing so. That then means you do need to look at alternatives like we did with the Rwanda plan. And, we looked at, for example, the Australian model where they agreed a deal with a third country because, if you can't actually remove someone somewhere, then you're going to end up with them. And that's the whole business plan, if I can put it that way, of the people smuggling gangs. So, yeah, today's agreements are welcome. They're not something to criticise in themselves. But it needs to be part of an overall approach. And it's also worth noting what Greece has already done in terms of its systemic approach, which has actually started to reduce flows quite dramatically coming through Southeast Europe. But now we need to see similar in Italy, which Giorgia Meloni is trying to do, and ditto in Spain to, again, further tighten up the European border. But ultimately, you do need the answer to what do you do with someone who their country of origin won't take them back or can't take them back because it's a regime we just can't deal with. The safe and democratic country they've just left won't take them back. What is the answer there? And that's where you need third-party agreements.
Excellent stuff. Always a pleasure to have your company on the show. That's the former Minister for Immigration, Kevin Foster. Thank you. Now let's go live now to Budapest and speak to GBNews' political correspondent, Catherine Forster, who is there with the Prime Minister. Catherine, welcome to the show. So we were hoping to keep this conversation about the Balkans and return agreements, but suddenly Ukraine seems to have overshadowed matters somewhat. Tell us more.
Good afternoon, Martin. There is one person who is not here but has totally overshadowed this meeting of EU and other European leaders. That person is, of course, Donald Trump. Now, with that spectacular victory, European leaders here are wondering how they are going to deal with the big challenges that he brings, top of which is his complete and utter unpredictability. So they were always going to be talking about security, about defense, about Ukraine, as well as illegal migration. But now, of course, security and trade and Ukraine absolutely at the top, and all being seen through the prism of what Donald Trump may or may not do when he comes to power, because of course he's threatening to put big tariffs on goods being sent from elsewhere into the United States. If that happens, that could have a very big impact on European and indeed global economies. So they're very concerned about that. And more than that too, of course, the thorny issue of Ukraine. This EPC meeting of European leaders first began after Russia invaded Ukraine back in 2022. And here we are with no end in sight to that war, but a returning president who has said that he would end it in one day. Now, nobody knows what will happen, but clearly Volodymyr Zelensky is very, very concerned that US may basically turn around and say you've got to accept things as they are now. And he's not happy with that at all. He's been speaking today and he's been saying there has been much talk about the need to yield to Putin and back down to make some concessions. It is unacceptable for Ukraine and suicidal for all Europe. So a huge amount of concern. And simply nobody knows what is going to happen come January the 20th. But of course, the war will have to end at some point. It's gone on and on. There's been no sign of any sort of breakthrough. But it feels like this is a moment where things might begin to change.
Excellent stuff there. Great summary there from Budapest. Catherine Forster, thank you very, very much. Now, has Donald Trump's election victory spelt the death of woke? Well, that's our debate. Next, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Love a bit of baking and share some hot tips. We're delighted to be joined by our baking extraordinaire, Matty Edgell, who won Great British Bake Off last year. Woo! Welcome. Congratulations as well. I'm sure you're sick of being congratulated.
And there's that reminder.
No, you like all the glory.
Yeah.
What was it like winning the Great British Bake Off? What's last year been like for you?
Winning I was not expecting to win. At any point until they said my name.
You're a very humble
nice
guy.
Surprise. No, I was just
really
in touch with reality. Yeah, no, I wasn't.
Was it quite a close race throughout then?
Yeah, I considered myself the underdog throughout. I think the first week I turned around after the showstopper and kind of saw how good everyone was, and then looked at mine and thought, how have I got here? And that kind of theme followed through.
But then that surely like an underdog.
Yeah, it did.
Actually, I'm going to get better throughout this.
Yeah, I think it made me kind of like really tune into the feedback that they was giving me and trying to embed that throughout. So that's probably why.
Could you feel yourself improving as the series went on?
Definitely, and I think also like kind of simultaneously my confidence improved at the same time, and then that like little bit of belief in myself probably helped out as well.
What was your strength? Biscuits, cake, bread?
I think cake's my strength.
Cake.
I think cake, typically if you start baking, that's probably where you start, isn't it? So that was what I knew most.
How did you start baking?
I've been asked this so many times since...
You don't know?
I attribute it to my nan.
Sweet.
But yeah, I would say, I think most people probably attribute it to like a grandparent or something that they maybe done with like their parents when they was growing up. So that's I'll give it to my nan.
Or the major lockdown baking boom.
Yeah, banana bread.
Everybody,
all over the place, isn't it? It's good.
Yeah, it's really good. I love a banana bread, even now.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:26. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, Donald Trump has promised to wage a war on woke. The next US president has vowed to end trans rights in sport and boot out diversity and inclusion hires in all public services. You might say hurrah, or you might be crying into your liberal tears. Well, is this the end for woke, and should we be celebrating that? Well, joining me now to discuss this is the director of the New Culture Forum, Peter Whittle, who joins me in the studio, and the human rights and activist Peter Tatchell, who joins me down the line. Gentlemen, welcome to you. Let's start with you, Peter Whittle.
Yes.
You did an excellent piece I saw this morning from the New Culture Forum, talking about why you think the war on woke is a good thing.
I think it is. I think it's, shall we say, a body blow to woke, because it is so embedded, and by that I mean woke ideology, identity politics, all of these things. And essentially, it's across all institutions in America, education, the civil service, universities, definitely. It's exactly the same here. So, in fact, it's very embedded, so it will take some time. But I think that this has been an enormous kind of a huge fillip and a huge boost to those of us who spend our time fighting against what I think is utterly destructive ideology, which is pretty much held power now for, well, a good 5 years, getting on for 10 years.
Peter Tatchell, do you think that the identity politics, inclusion, equality, it started out as very well-meaning, but it became something of a monster?
Well, it certainly started out, and for the most part still is about uplifting and supporting people who are vulnerable and who are left behind. So I've been involved in the campaign supporting the WASPy woman, that is the women in Britain born in the 1950s who've lost out on their state pensions. And shamefully, the Labour government has not delivered the compensation that it promised when it was in opposition. So I don't think it's woke or bad that I'm defending and supporting those very brave, courageous women who've been badly
Peter,
let down.
I don't think defending pensioners is what we're talking about. That's something that anyone would agree is fair. This is about allowing biological men to play sport against women. It's about hiring people on their identity politics rather than on their merit. That's the conversation here. That is what Donald Trump is waging war on.
Well, what Donald Trump calls woke is what most of us call kindness and respect for others. But on the points you raise, very important points, yes, there is an issue about trans women in sport. And as everyone knows, I've opposed a blanket ban on trans women in sport, but I do think there should be individual assessment, as there is already, and those who are deemed to have an unfair advantage should not be eligible. On the issue of equality and inclusion, that does include elderly folk. It includes women and ethnic minorities, but they should be protected based on merit, not on special privileges. And no one's arguing in favour of special privileges. We just want a fair and equal playing field for everyone. And that, I think, is the British liberal value.
No, Peter, you're totally evading the point here. You know what we're both talking about. We're talking about identity politics. We're talking about trans ideology. We're talking about all of those things. We're talking about critical race theory, all of these things that have infected all of our institutions. It's nothing to do with kindness. If anything, it's the opposite of that. These things are an attack, actually, on our very kind of way of life. They are an attack on the established foundations of our civilization, actually. This is why this particular victory for Trump is so important. And in fact, I'd go further than that, actually. It's not just a sort of victory for Trump. It's a victory for American people. They knew what they were getting with Trump, and they voted for him in greater numbers than ever before. Anyone who is opposed to ideology of woke and identity politics should be very, very pleased right now.
Peter Thatcher?
No one is in favour of any oppressive ideology except a very, very tiny, unrepresentative minority.
Not true.
What most people are saying is, yes, there is a problem. In our major institutions, there is an underrepresentation of women and ethnic minority people, and we need to correct that. Not by promoting people who don't merit it or don't deserve it, but by acknowledging that there are very competent, well-qualified women and black people who could do top
but
jobs.
But there are very competent white working class people too, who, Peter, who, for example, aren't welcome anymore in the military.
Sorry?
There are very competent white working class men as well who are being deliberately, specifically excluded from inclusivity, for example, in the RAF.
Well, that example you highlight, I disagree with that. I agree.
But that is what woke does. That's what it does.
People should be promoted on merit, and discrimination against white working class people or anybody is wrong. And that's what the Equality Act says. The Equality Act of 2010 protects white working class people as much as everyone else.
Where? Peter?
No.
Well,
Peter,
one of the issues is the underperformance of young white boys in schools.
Yeah, and there's no equality to protect them. You know it, Peter Tatchell. There is no equality to protect them. Peter Whittle.
The point is, Peter, that you talk about merit there, and I would agree with you. But the fact is that the whole point of identity politics and DEI and all of these things is actually anti-merit, right? It's actually basically putting people forward or preferring them because of various characteristics. That is the situation we're in. Any fight back from that, and if it comes in the form of Donald Trump, is a very, very good thing. Can I also add another thing? It goes further than that. It's also the attacks that there have been on our history, the attacks on the whole idea of the nation. All of these things, people have absolutely had enough of it. And I hope that the effect of this victory will actually go right across the West.
OK, gentlemen, we have to call it time there. We've simply run out of time. We have to go to the news. Peter Whittle and Peter Tatchell, thank you very, very much for a most lively woke debate. Lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock, including we'll be hearing from farmers about how today's interest rate decision will impact them. But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Hill.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 3:30. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Our top story, the interest rate's been cut by 0.25%, only the second reduction in almost 4 years. The Bank of England has cut the interest rate from 5% down to 4.75%. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says we need to make sure inflation stays close to target, so we can't cut interest rates too quickly or by too much. This follows the initial cut in August when inflation fell to its 2% target. Chancellor Rachel Reeves says with interest rates on a downward path, the Labour government is a world away from the last Parliament.
It's welcome news for millions of homeowners and businesses that interest rates have been cut today to 4.75%. I do, though, recognise that for many people who took out mortgages a few years ago, they're still looking at higher rates because of the spike in interest rates after the Conservative mini-budget 2 years ago.
Cheshire Police say MP Mike Amesbury has been charged with assault following an incident in Frodsham. A video had emerged of him appearing to punch a man to the ground. According to the police, the 55-year-old is set to appear in Magistrates' Court at a later date. The charge relates to reports of an assault on a 45-year-old man in Frodsham, which was reported to the police on the 26th of October. Mike Amesbury has said he's continuing to cooperate with police after being summoned to court over a deeply regrettable incident. Sir Keir Starmer is set to sign a deal with Balkan nations to target people smuggling gangs as he heads to Hungary for the 5th EU summit. 46 European leaders will discuss issues including economic security as well as migration concerns. The Prime Minister will announce new UK plans to clamp down on organised immigration crime abroad by signing new agreements with Serbia, North Macedonia and Kosovo. Meanwhile, the summit will also address Donald Trump's win as the bloc focuses on how to accommodate the country's 47th president. Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride praised the special relationship between the UK and the US. He also told GB News the government needs to take defence spending more seriously. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sophia Hill. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying gloomy for the rest of today. Low cloud and drizzle extensively. Some brighter spells, mostly to the north and northwest of higher ground because of the wind direction. Technical term for this weather, anticyclonic gloom. That's where low cloud gets trapped under high pressure and it stays in the same place for days on end, and that is indeed what we're seeing, with very little sun strength this time of year to lift the cloud. So the cloudy skies continue into the evening and overnight. Some clear spells continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps North Wales. Where that happens, temperatures dipping close to freezing, a few fog patches, but otherwise it's grey skies remaining and lows of 7 to 9 Celsius. Some drizzle about first thing Friday, especially across western parts of the country. So Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Wales. We'll see some hill fog and quite misty conditions in places. But the overcast skies continue effectively for much of the country. A few brighter spells there for northern parts of Northern Ireland and more especially northern Scotland. 1 or 2 fog patches in the glens, but they'll lift soon enough. And actually it's northern Scotland where we'll see the lowest temperatures first thing and then the highest temperatures by the afternoon because of the sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine there for northern Scotland for much of the day. We'll see some cloud breaks developing across northern England, southern Scotland, North Wales once again. But for the vast majority, we keep the low-lying cloud, and it's going to feel a bit colder, I think, compared with Thursday. So 10 to 13 Celsius, unless you get some sunshine, and then it's mid-teens. Into the evening, and it's more of the same effectively. One subtle difference is we'll see a bit more patchy rain arrive into the west, and actually we will see some rain crossing the country through the weekend, but that will clear the skies for Monday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon. Hello, I'm Jules Buckley. The M6 is still queuing Lancaster south to Broughton. That's junction 33 towards the M55 at 32. A lane closure still in place in both directions. It's for emergency repairs, pretty slow going. A northbound M1 just before Bedford at 13, and the roadwork still queuing, not helped by an earlier collision there. Now between the Pevensey roundabout and the Lamb Inn in Bexhill, the A259 in East Sussex closed both ways. 2 vehicles there for the serious collision, so delayed in both directions. Bodmin in Cornwall, the bypass, the eastbound A30, that's currently closed from the A38 to Carmano Cross through towards the St Brewer turning in Temple. There's been a serious collision there, so that eastbound side of the bypass is closed and it's queuing. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 3:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, as expected, the Bank of England has reduced interest rates from 5% to 4.75%. And after it was so hard hit by the Chancellor's budget, what does the agricultural sector think of this important decision? Well, to answer that question, let's speak now to GB News' reporter Will Hollis. Will, I believe you're in Bakewell there, a place I know very, very well. Tell us, it's been a tough time for farmers, what with the inheritance tax hike and now interest rates. What does this mean for the farming community?
Yes, well, it's been a long day here in Bakewell at the Agricultural Business Centre in the heart of rural Derbyshire. We've got sheep here in the background. You can see them, you can hear them, but I won't describe for you the smell because it's not PG for daytime television, Martin. But what is PG is, of course, those the news that came in today about the Bank of England interest rates, the reduction which was expected by economists and analysis, bring it down from 5% to 4.75%. We've been speaking to farmers here today, and a lot of people are very happy to hear that. But there is, of course, a backdrop of difficulties, financial difficulties. Here to tell us a little bit more is one of the advisors at Bagshaw's. Bagshaw's organises the auctioneer here, Emily. What's the reaction to interest rates coming down, even if it is by 0.25%?
It is welcomed. We're all very pleased. Farming basically runs in debt. We have a lot of overdrafts, a lot of mortgages. Livestock is financed a lot of the time. So it is welcomed, but there is the backdrop of the agricultural property leaf, which is really hurting farmers.
That's that inheritance tax, which we've been seeing in the news. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and the new Labour government raising inheritance tax, whereas before farmers were exempt. How much of a problem will that be for farmers, particularly family-run farms?
So it will be a massive impact to us. The in terms of the agriculture property relief and the business property relief being combined, that affects everything on farm. It's not just the land and property. So one combine harvester and one forage harvester, you're at your £1 million before you even start on any land, any property, any livestock. And these are fundamental to a lot of farms, and the machinery will hit that cap before we even get to the land.
So a £1 million exemption is peanuts, essentially, in a farm that might cost £5 to £10 million. And what will that mean then for farms that have ran for generations, 2, 3, 4 generations, if they are then taxed with an inheritance tax?
A lot will be sold and they will be split, which will affect food security in this country, because without these farms, without the generations of farming behind it, that will all get lost. And farming is very close-knit. We're a rare community, and it will have significant effects to the next generation.
I said at the start, you're an advisor for Bagshaws, who run the auctioneers here in Bakewell, but you also help to arrange mortgages, agricultural mortgages, so large pieces of land. What are you hearing from people that are maybe considering getting a mortgage, or just want to know what Bagshaws, as a leading organisation, think of the inheritance tax?
The inheritance tax is a big problem, because we're going to have we're still going to have high mortgage rates. It's still 4.75%, and we're going to be buying farms, which effectively we'll then be paying tax on again when we die. So it's a welcomed reduction, but there is a lot going on behind the scenes in terms of inheritance tax, and is it really worth buying it if we're going to get taxed on it heavily when we die?
And how are the farmers feeling, the farmers that you speak to every single... Connor, it is noisy here today, and there's only a few sheep left. Most of them have been sold. Yet, what do the farmers think in the conversations over what has just been a short week?
So a lot of farmers have already sat around the kitchen table and thought, if it comes, what's going to give? And we do say speak to your accountant, speak to the tax advisors, and keep planning and keep following, and hope it gets overturned.
You're a young farmer. A lot of farmers have been doing this for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but it's young farmers that are really going to keep the industry going forward. Why would a young farmer want to get into this business right now when there are worries about financial problems, even without thinking about inheritance tax?
It's a fantastic industry to come into. We work with livestock all the time. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's 24/7. But it's a really good thing. You live in the countryside, you work the land, and it's just such a good community to work with. Then,
if you had one or a couple of sentences to say to Rachel Reeves, who probably isn't watching right now because she's the Chancellor and doing many things, but if you had one message to her from the farmers of Derbyshire, what would it be?
It would be to overturn the inheritance tax on the agriculture property relief and the business property relief, because it will cripple the countryside.
Emily Mosley, an advisor for Bagshaws and auctioneers and mortgage arranger here in Derbyshire and the rural areas. Martin, you know Bakewell very well, home of the Bakewell pudding, that sweet treat and that dessert, but I can tell you here as well, the bacon cobs are pretty good.
Sorry, Will, just get into the spirit of things there. Thank you for ramming home the message there from Bakewell. You weren't at all tart with it. Thank you very much. Now, should pro-Palestinian marches be taking place, get this, on Remembrance Sunday? Or is it completely disrespectful to our braved armed forces veterans? We'll be talking about that next. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Let's speak now to Charlie Mullins, who's the founder of Pimlico Plumbers, and entrepreneur Oliver Hodgson. Really good to see you both this morning. Charlie, let's start with you. Has working from home and the culture surrounding working from home killed work experience, do you think?
Undoubtedly. Many companies now are not getting youngsters in for the work experience because of the fact they don't have the staff in. So if they're only in 2 days a week, they're not going to get in the youngsters. They've got no one to train them. So it's killed it totally. And if you think it's bad now, probably 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be absolutely ridiculous. This working from home, I said from day one, is going to kill youngsters' futures, youngsters' careers, and getting people into the workplace. So now the damage is showing through, unfortunately. COVID finished a couple of years ago. The working from home should have stopped, and get people back into the workplace.
I mean, Oliver, you have to say it's difficult to see how people in a work-from-home environment can do any sort of on-the-job training at all.
It's really interesting, the work experience piece, actually, because we run an internship program in the summer here. We had 5 people in the office in person and they really thrived, but we did have a couple of people who joined remotely because of their own reasons, right, and where they were. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that as well, because I've got clients who have completely remote teams. Now, I don't. I have an office and our team are based in here, but our clients who do, they're able to offer work experience opportunities digitally with fantastic technology to people across the world, right? So they have people in their team who are working from all sorts of different continents, which is obviously fantastic. But I agree with Charlie, right? You cannot knock in-person engagement. You cannot knock being in the office.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 3:48. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, on Remembrance Sunday this weekend, pro-Palestine protests have also been planned in Birmingham, Liverpool, Bath and across Ireland. Posters like this have sparked outrage as this Sunday is dedicated to veterans and the war dead who gave their lives for us in conflicts around the world. Now, joining us now to discuss this is Oliver Robertson, the head of Witness and Worship for the Quakers in Britain. Oliver, welcome to the show. Now, it's fair to say that this has gone down extremely badly with British Armed Services veterans. They think Remembrance Sunday is sacred. They admit that people have a right to protest, but just do it on a different day. What's your take?
My take is that nobody should be disturbing any act of remembrance. It is, as you say, a solemn occasion, and I think that it's wrong to disrupt it. However, I don't think that that's the only thing that can or should happen on that day. And I also think that, like many Quakers, we believe that all life is sacred, that any life lost in war is awful and a tragedy. And therefore, if people are going to be thinking about the current wars as well as the past ones, then remembering the dead who are dying now, as well as the ones who died 80 years ago or more, is an acceptable thing to do.
But Oliver, every weekend is a pro-Palestine protest in Britain now across most of the major conurbations. This is a weekly occurrence. Remembrance Sunday is an annual occurrence. It existed way before any pro-Palestine protests in the United Kingdom. Don't you think it would be fair just to take a day off? Just don't conflate the two. And in particular, we have seen Palestinian-coloured poppies. We've seen the hashtag Poppies for Palestine. This is sacred ground to British Armed Services veterans, and the two have no place together.
So I think that when somebody says, this is personally offending me, then it's something that I do take seriously and I do listen to. But I also think that there's more... one of the reasons you have the different kinds of poppies, you've got the red ones, you've got the white ones, you've got purple and black ones. I think that's because there are lots of things that happen in war and lots of awful things that happen in war, and that the different ones are there to remember different things. Now, I don't think the fact that there's a Palestinian poppy or any other poppy degrades the red poppy or what it stands for. Many Quakers wear red ones because there are Quakers who have family members who have died in wars, who have been armed soldiers. There are also Quakers who wear white poppies because there are civilians and others who die in war. The white one is about remembering everyone who dies, civilian or military, from this country or any other. And I think that remembrance of the humanity of everyone, you know, we're all people before we're Palestinian or British or soldier or civilian. And it's important to remember that.
Now, it's worth pointing out that 12,000 Palestinians did serve in the British Army. There are 3,000, I understand. We were told this by Liverpool Friends of Palestine, who we contacted before the show. 3,000 British soldiers died in Gaza and are buried there in a Commonwealth war grave. That's very, very much marked and very, very much appreciated. So we can remember that by wearing a red poppy on Remembrance Sunday. And if you want to talk about the current conflict in Gaza, or indeed any historical conflict on Gaza, fine, do it on a different day.
I mean, part of this, though, is about what people are fighting for. And actually, if we're wanting a free society and a pluralistic society where different people can hold different views and discuss them respectfully, then actually one of the things that I think best shows that is the willingness at times, which are important to some people, to say that it's also okay for there to be space for other people to do their own things in a different place, in a different time, on the same day. I think that saying that nothing else is allowed to happen at all on Remembrance Sunday feels too much like it's.
Well, how do you think it would go down, Oliver? How do you think it would go down if a bunch of armed forces veterans turned up on Eid and said, "Let's make this about the British Armed Forces"? No, it would go down terribly. The point is, have your own commemoration on a different day in a different way.
I think that if you're going to interrupt an Eid celebration and say we want to come into this space and do our own thing there, yeah, that would go down terribly. I think saying you're doing.
Well, that's what would happen if they turn up at a Remembrance show.
We're going to do something in a different place. I don't think that's a problem in the same way. There are going to be many things happening on Remembrance Sunday which are not Remembrance and are not Palestine demonstrations.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us. Oliver Robertson, the head of Witnesses and Worship for the Quakers in Britain. Now, we've got a quick statement. West Midlands Police and Avon and Somerset Police told GB News that no event has been confirmed for this week to their knowledge and are contacting organisers for more information, while police in Ireland say they respect the right for citizens to exercise their constitutional rights and have no role to permit or authorise gatherings. And we contacted Merseyside Police but received no reply. But Liverpool Friends of Palestine have confirmed a march will go ahead and told us never again should mean never again. Our call for a ceasefire is precisely what should be heard on Remembrance Sunday. Well, what do you make of that? Now, within the next few minutes, Joe Biden will address America with his hugely anticipated presidential loser speech. Will he say well done or will he be a sourpuss? That's next.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying gloomy for the rest of today. Low cloud and drizzle extensively. Some brighter spells, mostly to the north and northwest of higher ground because of the wind direction. Technical term for this weather, anticyclonic gloom. That's where low cloud gets trapped under high pressure and it stays in the same place for days on end, and that is indeed what we're seeing, with very little sun strength this time of year to lift the cloud. So the cloudy skies continue into the evening and overnight. Some clear spells continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps North Wales. Where that happens, temperatures dipping close to freezing, a few fog patches, but otherwise it's grey skies remaining and lows of 7 to 9 Celsius. Some drizzle about first thing Friday, especially across western parts of the country. So Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Wales. We'll see some hill fog and quite misty conditions in places. But the overcast skies continue effectively for much of the country. A few brighter spells there for northern parts of Northern Ireland and more especially northern Scotland. 1 or 2 fog patches in the glens, but they'll lift soon enough. And actually it's northern Scotland where we'll see the lowest temperatures first thing and then the highest temperatures by the afternoon because of the sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine there for northern Scotland for much of the day. We'll see some cloud breaks developing across northern England, southern Scotland, North Wales once again. But for the vast majority, we keep the low-lying cloud, and it's going to feel a bit colder, I think, compared with Thursday. So 10 to 13 Celsius, unless you get some sunshine, and then it's mid-teens. Into the evening, and it's more of the same effectively. One subtle difference is we'll see a bit more patchy rain arrive into the west, and actually we will see some rain crossing the country through the weekend, but that will clear the skies for Monday.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Still a lane closure in place for both sides of the M6 this afternoon, junction 33 Garstang, through towards the M55 at the Broughton interchange at junction 32, as emergency repairs continues a slow going north and southbound. A couple of issues in London. The Chingford Mount Road is currently closed by Normanshire Drive and slow going at the scene of a collision there, and in Earlsfield, Garrett Lane between Burntwood Lane and Waldron Roads closed off at the scene of an accident. Now, Pevensey in East Sussex, the A259 shut between the Pevensey roundabout and the Lamb Inn in Bexhill for investigation work. That's causing queue through Watling. And Bodmin in Cornwall, the eastbound side of the A30 bypass is closed from the A38 at Carmano Cross through towards St Brewer turning in Temple at the scene there of a serious collision.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
You could win Christmas on us this year. There's cash, £20,025 in tax-free cash to make your new year go with a bang. There's also £5,000 to spend on all the gifts. We've also got Christmas lunch for you, with £500 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a festive GB News goodie bag. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about?
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's the show with me, Martin Daubney, from Westminster. It's 4 p.m. here on GB News. Now, any moment now, we'll cross to the White House, where President Joe Biden will be addressing the result of the US presidential election. Now, he had, of course, planned to run himself, but made way, well, that's one way of putting it, as the Democrats' candidate for his Vice President, Kamala Harris. Well, unluckily for her, she lost to the Republican Donald Trump, to the huge chagrin of the liberal masses in the media, and now Trump will become the 47th President of the United States, as well, of course, as being the 45th President. Well, joining me now is our political editor, Chris Hope, and also the spokesperson from Republicans Overseas UK, Jennifer Ewing, and also the former Labour MP, Stephen Pound. All of you, welcome to the studio. 24 hours on, the planet's still spinning. The world hasn't ended. Jennifer Ewing, Donald Trump is the 47th President of the USA. Now, before we go to Joe Biden to see his hugely anticipated speech, can I get first your reaction from the Republican camp to this historic victory?
Sure. I mean, we're absolutely
thrilled at the result, not entirely surprised. We did think he had the momentum with him definitely going into the last 2 or 3 weeks, but more importantly, the issue set was on his side from the very beginning. You know, the voters, the Americans were constantly telling people that the top 2 things, or 2 of the top things that they were looking at was basically the economy and inflation, and then, of course, the crisis we have with illegal immigration at the southern border. And you know, I think people vote on issues. They vote on policies. And unfortunately, for the other side, they were quite policy light. So, yeah, I think it's extraordinary. One of the great bonuses, I guess I would say, is how quickly it happened and how decisively it happened. The last thing we would have wanted is for the counting to have carried on into the weekend, or, God forbid, have something like the 2000 Bush-Gore election where they were counting, you know, pregnant chads in hanging chads, pregnant chads, wherever in Florida.
You do pregnant, I'll do hanging.
Yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I'll clean up my language or whatever you're implying there. I don't know, but no, it's. I mean, he's got a mandate for sure. You'll see. We took the Senate as well. We'll see what happens with the House. So yeah.
But the House could take another week. You know, and we've also got the overseas, you know, the military votes to come in. But I think, and it's not for me to comment too much on internal American politics, but obviously in a gracious way, from the losing perspective, I congratulate you. My efforts over there a couple of weeks ago clearly didn't bear fruit.
You're one of those lefties over there campaigning on behalf of the Labour Party, the sort of people interfering with foreign democracy.
I know. Well, unlike Nigel Farage, of course, you know, who was welcomed over there with open arms. But look, it's going to be bad for Britain, come what may. His tariffs is his big thing, and he's going to have a trade war with China. If China's going to start dumping on us, and if he actually does impose a 10% tariffs on all goods into the USA, that affects us. And I have to say, if I was in the Scotch whisky industry today, I'd be very, very worried. But, you know, let's give him a fair chance. I mean, the moment he's talked about Robert Kennedy Jr. being Minister for vaccines or something, I mean, it's going to be pretty weird. It's going to be a bumpy ride, isn't it?
Well, one thing for sure, Chris, hope is that we will never have a dull moment.
How true.
As political journalists, these are salad days. I mean, this is an amazing time to, whatever your politics. I mean, we know that the audiences go through the roof on the Liberal side of things. CNN never had better figures when Donald Trump was in power last time because they've got something to cry about. And haven't they taken it really, really rather badly across the spectrum? It's been an astonishing reaction.
Because they missed it. They missed the result. I mean, they thought it'd be a tight result. I mean, look at the numbers now. 290 plus seats in the electoral colleges to 223 or so for Kamala Harris. It's nowhere near a tight result. I mean, what we're going to be seeing, aren't we, is diplomacy by Twitter. Now, everyone forgets that we'd wake up each morning and see what he's tweeted about, and he could do anything. I'm sure right now in Whitehall, the UK government is getting ready for some tweet about the Chagos Islands, and Trump saying, I'm sorry, I can't agree to it. And that would just sink the entire deal.
Yeah.
So we are now into this new world of what's he going to say on Twitter. Quite exciting. What I want to see, then, we're looking at pictures of the White House where we'll hear from President Biden. Will he apologise for hanging on for so long when he clearly shouldn't have stood, and that didn't give Kamala Harris a chance to go through the process of being selected, and also the party to work out if Kamala Harris was the right candidate or somebody else in the movement?
And that's an interesting point, Jennifer Ewing, because a lot of people, I know you, when you were in the show before, Joe Biden was Donald Trump's ideal opponent, because the guy was clearly not fully in control of his faculties. We can all admit that now. Now the show is over. And yet, Kamala Harris scored lower than Joe Biden everywhere in this election. Joe Biden got more votes than Kamala Harris, I think, in practically every state, every demographic, amongst everyone. She was a poor candidate.
She was, and anybody that, well, first of all, I mean, anyone that was really paying attention could have told you a year and a half ago, and I am on the record as saying this, there's no way that Joe Biden would have been the nominee come November 2024. So that's one thing. But, you know, the media continued to run cover for him until that disastrous debate at the end of June, in which case they had no question but to push him off the cliff and come up with someone new. Now, what they should have done at that point was something, I don't know, that democracy usually happens in democracy, which is give the Democratic people a primary.
Yeah.
So they could have chosen the right candidate. They've got some great Democrats, some really good governors. Kamala Harris was so unpopular when she ran in 2020 that she had to drop out early. She was also the most unpopular vice president. So it's not you know, enough that the media runs cover and you work on vibes. There's no way she was going to win.
And bringing us to today, again, got the live screens there of the live pictures of what the White House. Joe Biden expected to address the nation shortly. His wife yesterday wore a dress that matched yours.
Exactly.
Do you think there's some animosity from within the Biden camp? They feel like they've been stabbed in the back. They feel like he didn't want to stand down, but maybe was forced into doing so. And do you think today we might get some reference to that? And most importantly, will he be gracious in defeat, or will he just still see Donald Trump as his absolute nemesis, even in this final address to the nation?
No, first of all, there is a lot of contention between President Biden and Vice President Harris, for sure. She was involved in what was really the coup, pushing him off the cliff that month, that weekend. So there's no love lost there. And, he already has, I believe, phoned President-elect Trump. So I think he will be gracious. I really do. And that's funny. A lot of people picked up on the red color that Joe Biden wore to the vote, and it's the same thing as a couple months ago Biden was holding on to the red MAGA hat. So who knows what these symbols mean, but
Stephen Pound, what's your take on it? Does seem to be an extraordinarily hard thing for Liberals, for Democrats to say well done, to be gracious in defeat. There's been the world's biggest temper tantrum thus far.
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, let's face it, whatever he says is going to be a lot better than what Donald Trump said 4 years ago. I mean, and I don't think Kamala Harris is going to be leading a mob on the White House. So I think we've got, and where I'd agree with Jennifer is, if you look at the way that the stock markets have absolutely rocketed up throughout the world, that's mostly because they actually see a transition that is indisputable. But I think what Joe Biden won't do is he won't say sorry. If he's going to say sorry, he'll say that to the Democratic National Committee convention. He won't say it publicly. What he will say is that he accepts the result of this. He wishes the president-elect Godspeed, and he wants a peaceful transition. I would hope that he would also be keeping a very, very close eye on some of the policy statements, because what President-elect Trump has said is that he's going to have a whole load of oven-ready policies which are going to be switched on the day after he gets elected. You mentioned the Chagos Islands. I'm worried about terrorists. And the idea of mass deportations on the southern border, extending all those things, he's going to have them ready, oven-ready, shovel-ready, and that's what we need to keep an eye on.
Well, that's what people voted for.
Yeah.
I know.
That's
what they wanted.
I know. Well, yeah, but the consequence, they voted for it. But do we know? It's like Brexit. People voted for Brexit, but they didn't know what the consequences were. But the reality is, in all honesty, we need to actually have something for Joe Biden's legacy. I would have said the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a very, very...
Which caused inflation.
No, it didn't. It actually reduced it. You've got very low inflation in America at the moment. The Fed have just cut rates again, and so have we in this country, and we don't do it unless the Fed does it. Look, so I would hope there'd be some legacy from Joe Biden. He was profoundly an honest, a decent man. We all know that. Totally out of his depth, and he probably handed you the election on this occasion. I hate to say it, but I think it wasn't entirely a triumph for Trump. I think it was a disaster for the Democrats.
Right, isn't this the point, Chris Hope, is that the blame game, it's like, Joe Biden should have stood down sooner. Kamala Harris fought the wrong campaign. Nobody seems to be able to accept that perhaps they actually voted for Donald Trump because they like what he was saying. They like the fact that he was saying, let's be tough on the border, let's deport illegal immigrants, let's drill for gas, let's bring energy prices down, let's bring grocery prices down, let's kick the woke nonsense out of the public sector, let's get trans women out of women's sport. These are things that people like. They might be populists, but they prove to be rather popular.
Well, the irony is that people don't like what he says when it's offensive, which is offensive about women and that kind of thing, but they like what he does. His actions are one of putting America first. He talks about this big game on sorting out world peace on day one in Ukraine. What does that mean for Ukraine? We'll wait and see. That trepidation, we're watching that in the UK. But elsewhere, the actions he takes to build that wall. I mean, I think people discount his more offensive remarks because they think he's got America and will put it first. They worry about. They look at the candidate Kamala Harris, and with her, there's a debate in their party about what is a woman and these trans issues. It doesn't. If you're worrying about feeding your children, these things are irrelevant, and they make the Democrats look out of touch.
But surely, Chopper, what it came down to is the Ronald Reagan playbook. Ronald Reagan, when he beat Carter, he said, "Do you feel better off now than you were 4 years ago?" That was a killer line. Absolutely. I was there at the time. It was a killer. We could not actually get any traction on an opposition to that. And in all honesty, when he says to people, do you feel better? Never mind the stuff about Arnold Palmer's manhood and all that stuff. Just say, do you feel better off now than you were 4 years ago? The answer is no, and he got the votes.
Was it simply, as Bill Clinton said, just about...
As James Colville said.
The economy is stupid.
Carville.
Was it just about that, or was it more? I mean, there is a huge... I mean, my sister lives in Texas. She's married to a Mexican. These people who aren't meant to vote Donald Trump, they all did. All their friends did. And they didn't care about identity politics. They didn't care about what he said on a bus 10 years ago.
Yeah.
They care about rocketing bills, the gasoline's through the roof, their growth... The price of a chicken has doubled.
Gasoline hasn't gone through the roof. It's incredible. It's cheaper than it's been for years in America.
Oh, would you like me to answer the question?
Yeah,
so actually, you know what? I'm happy for you to continue answering my questions because well, you know, this is a perfect example of actually how Trump won. Because yes, Martin, it was the policies that we just discussed, economy and inflation, and in addition to you know, the crisis at the southern border. But what was more is the people were completely sick and tired of others not listening to them and saying, oh, you know, we need to make sure this isn't instilled on day one. And it, dare I say, it was the Democrats were not listening to the people on the ground, and they got sick of being insulted and condescended to and everything called, you know, fascists and misogynists and racist. I mean, Trump's numbers, basically, he did better with black men, Hispanics, younger voters, and, wait for it, women than he did the time before. So are all of those people wrong?
And actually, his vote amongst white people decreased.
Decreased, you're right.
His vote became a word, which I know you love, Stephen Pound, more diverse. He's got a more, and not only that, a bigger share. If all of the swing states which are still being counted go to Trump, and they're leaning very heavily thus, he will end up with more popular votes than JFK in 1960.
Well, he won't come close to LBJ in 64. That's still our democratic high point. But look, I think one of the things that really, I don't know if it struck you the same, Jennifer, but that young men and to a certain extent young women, people in the 20 to 30 age group voting for him, I think that's extraordinary because that's the exact opposite of what's happening in this country, the precise opposite. That age group, that demographic is overwhelmingly voting for the Labour Party in this country. And yet he's cut through. I don't know how he's done it.
With 36% of the population.
Well, I know. Exactly. I mean, it hurts.
I mean, it wasn't the 100% of the country, was it?
No, but it still hurts.
Yeah, but you know what? In America, we're far less liberal and we are we're more aspirational.
Well, I don't know. I think you are. I mean, one of the things I was talking to the Armenian groups in California, but the rest of California I went to, I've never seen such liberalism in my life. And I went up to to Portland in Oregon. Incredibly liberal people. You know, they actually had a stripper running for the mayor of Portland.
She
didn't get elected.
Make America nude again. Yeah.
She believes in complete transparency.
Is there a read across to UK politics from this, do you think? Do you look at what Trump's done there? I mean, Nigel Farage is back in the UK on his show tonight with the latest from Trumpland. Is there a read across? I mean, he is, of course, the UK version of Trump, is he? I mean, maybe he channels that populism. I mean, would it work here, do you think?
I don't know. I mean, what I think is, and you've all mentioned it to a certain extent, I think, you know, the AOC and some of the other people in the House who've actually pushed this incredibly over-the-top woke agenda, that has actually stuck in people's throats. They're getting pretty fed up with that. And I think that's going to get a read across to this country too.
I wonder if the UK might catch up. We've seen, Chris Hope, across the European bloc, the European Union bloc swinging towards the right. We've seen in Germany, we've seen in the Netherlands, in Hungary, in Sweden, in France, in Austria, in Spain. We are seeing a swing towards the right. Pictures there. This is the White House. That's the podium where the President Biden, still the current president, of course, until January, will shortly address the nation. Hugely anticipated speech. Kamala Harris last night gave a speech, what I thought was pretty sour-faced. She seemed very ungracious in defeat. Chris Hope, what do you think we can expect to hear from Joe Biden today? This is the sun setting on his career. Will he go down with a few spiteful words, or will he be gracious and chin held high?
Almost certainly the latter. What we know so far, he's invited to meet with Donald Trump in the White House. He wants to help with the handover of power, something which Trump didn't do back in 2020. We have a statement overnight from President Biden about Kamala Harris. Selecting her, he says, was the best decision he had made. I think that'll be debated by many academics and journalists for a long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's in his name. It was made in his name, Martin, and it was his, I'm sure. He says that it was extremely extraordinary circumstances that she was defeated in a historic campaign. And her campaign, Biden has said overnight, is embodied what's possible when guided by a strong moral compass and a clear vision for a nation that's more free, more just,
historic defeat.
And full opportunities for all Americans. So it may be that, you know, that she was the good guy and was defeated by powerful forces she couldn't come up against. Just carrying on that statement briefly, Martin, under those circumstances she stepped up and led a historic campaign. She calls them extraordinary circumstances caused by him, of course, not decided to hang on for as long as he could, and then giving over power to the candidature to Harris back in July. I mean, far too late for the party to select or even test whether Harris could cope with it.
OK, and Jennifer Ewing, on that point, the blame game has really started in earnest today. They're blaming the arrogance, the Democrats, senior Democrats, the arrogance of Joe Biden for refusing to listen to the interventions, to stand down sooner. Is there anything in that? Do you think if he stood down sooner and there had been a proper democratic process, as you mentioned before, would we have had a different candidate? And could history have been different?
Well, I think the arrogance probably started even before 2020. You know, they probably should have looked towards a more populist candidate, albeit on the left, Bernie Sanders, you know, who did well both in 2016 and, 2020. But the party sort of pushed him aside and decided they wanted Joe Biden. So it all started off there. He probably showed cognitive, decline going back as far there, but they had COVID and he was able to pretty much run from the basement. But look, there's a lot of blame to go around, but I still don't understand at any point the Democrats, from the point of Biden to Harris, there was no primary. The people did not get to choose, and this is how you end up with a vacuous candidate like Kamala Harris.
Stephen Pound, isn't that a fair point? There's all talk about Donald Trump being a dictator, nobody getting a say, but nobody had a say with Kamala Harris being the candidate. She was anointed. There was no democratic process. Was that part of the problem?
Well, I mean, I don't throw words like dictator and fascist around. I don't think it helps the debate if we use those words a great deal. Look, I spoke to a number of Democratic friends at the time, and they said there is no way on God's green earth Kamala Harris could not have been the candidate, because had they dumped her, then basically the whole black caucuses would have gone absolutely bananas. You cannot actually say that she's good enough to be the vice president and not good enough to be there. Had they had a proper primary, Elizabeth Warren or maybe the Secretary of State for Transport, there's some good Democrats out there. As for Bernie Sanders, he was basically Jeremy Corbyn in a better suit.
That's right, but the people liked him.
You would have ripped him to shreds.
Do you know what? I'll tell you something. No, but I think you're missing my point a little bit. I'm talking about the Democrats, and I'll tell you something. If Bernie Sanders had been allowed, I say, to go for the presidency in 2016, he would have beat Trump because he had the youth vote, and we would be looking at the end of his second term right now. I really believe that. America is looking for populism, right? It's like this whole thing against the elites and the establishment and the institutions, both on the left and the right. It just turns out the right is doing a little better, hence President Trump. So that's what a lot of people
and it is fair to say that Jeremy Corbyn did capture the youth vote in Britain, and he did it in very similar ways to Bernie, and that was bribery.
He got more votes than Keir Starmer.
Yeah, around tuition fees.
They all do bribery, Mark. Well, they all offer tax breaks or tax...
No, but they were offering specific tuition fee breaks, is what I'm saying, and that was a huge draw. And it nearly got his trotters in number 10.
Free broadband in every allotment shed, I think. But I mean, the fact remains, Bernie Sanders is the only person in the Senate who actually describes himself as a socialist. He is a socialist senator. You honestly think the Republicans wouldn't have absolutely waded in on him?
Well, look,
you would have put the boot in like there was no tomorrow.
Look, well, they hardly went for a moderate.
You personally, obviously.
Yeah. They hardly went for a moderate candidate with Kamala. I mean, her voting record when she was a U.S. senator in California was to the left of Bernie Sanders. So that argument doesn't completely hold up. And then with regards to going against the Black Caucus. That's the reason they had to keep Kamala Harris. Isn't it a bit rich and interesting that Trump did better with black men?
Yeah. It's very interesting. Yeah.
So the identity candidate doesn't work. And that's like a lot of people told Trump, oh, maybe you should pick Nikki Haley. Pick a woman. Pick somebody of a person of color or something. And he goes, no, I'm picking J.D. Vance because he is who I want to carry on my legacy, part of this team. He's a populist. He was wonderful when he wrote his book in 2016. 2016 called Hillbilly Elegy. And, you know, that's what the American people are craving.
Just to explain to people watching and or listening at home, there's a magnificent, that's a US Marine there, right? Standing guard, waiting for Joe Biden to come out. Perhaps they're waking him from an afternoon nap. I don't know what Joe Biden's doing in there. I'm being facetious, of course. This is a hugely important and anticipated speech. We're just waiting for the current president, Joe Biden, to come out and address the nation. But Chris Hope, you are making the point there. Isn't the idea of identity politics, of diversity hires, something that Donald Trump is now talking a lot about, has previously, as a problem? And Stephen Pound, there, you identify almost the party hung by their own petard. They had to stick with a candidate who was clearly and markedly and provenly inferior and unpopular with the electorate because she was a black woman, and we can't replace her because of that. Isn't that the problem?
Well, Martin, sorry, but we are seeing that in the UK at the moment. Kemi Badenoch is a black woman leading the oldest party, in one of the oldest parties, political parties in the world, and she makes tries to make no truck out of it, and she looks across at Labour, and we hear a lot about Rachel Reeves.
And she was democratically voted in, though.
Correct,
she was chosen
by members. But I think there's almost the read across the UK might be that the Tories appear not to make a lot about gender or about race.
Nor should they. I mean,
nor should they. But it is made as more of an issue in the Labour Party.
Well, Chuck, in 1983, the Tories had a killer poster that went out, and I'm not talking about Labour isn't working. They had a real killer. They had a picture of a black guy, and it said underneath it, Labour says he's black, we say he's British. And that was in 1983. Of course it was Saatchi, but it was a killer, believe you me.
And it kind of worked. I mean, that's why I think
it did work.
Kemi Badenoch can say that. And she said, she's rather dismissively about Rachel Reeves being the first female chancellor. Well, that's a very low ceiling for me. And she was attacked for saying that, but I know what she meant, you know.
But 40 years later, nobody in the Labour Party got the memo about that poster, because you're still obsessed with people being black and therefore give them a chance, whereas surely it should be about a meritocracy. And Jennifer, do you think we hear a lot about what to expect from Donald Trump when he gets into the White House? We had a debate earlier about this war on woke, getting the common sense back. And again, the political class, the media class, they clutch their pearls at the notion of this. But the public have just voted for it in the biggest democracy in the West.
You're exactly right, Martin. And it's not just in the presidential election. It's in a lot of the senatorial races, the House races. And let me just give you an example of, in my home state of California, there was a very unpopular attorney general down in Los Angeles, incredibly liberal. He got tossed out for the independent candidate, right? There was another bill on the ballot, Prop 36, which was, if you can believe it or not, was going to basically make it illegal again, excuse me, to steal up to $950, which incredibly has been legal under Gavin Newsom and some others. So common sense is definitely prevailing. And we saw similar things in a few of the New York bills, in a few of the Chicago, Illinois. People realize that the beautiful cities of the United States...
Here we go.
Oh, let's go.
The door has been opened. Here comes President Biden. He's got quite a pace there. He's got his aviators on, traditional sunglasses. Joe Biden coming out, about to address the nation. He looks pretty perky. He's definitely had his Weetabix. Here he is.
Good morning, good morning. Thank you, please. Thank you. Good to see this cabinet and the staff together here. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's good to see you all. Particularly good to see my granddaughter sitting in the front row here. Hi, Finn. How are you, honey? For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole. That's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition. That's what the American people deserve. Yesterday, I also spoke with Vice President Harris. She's been a partner and a public servant. She ran an inspiring campaign, and everyone got to see something that I learned early on to respect so much, her character. She has a backbone like a ramrod. She has great character, true character. She gave her whole heart and effort, and she and her entire team should be proud of the campaign they ran. You know, the struggle for the soul of America, since our very founding, has always been an ongoing debate and still vital today. I know for some people, it's a time for victory, to state the obvious. For others, it's a time of loss. Campaigns are contests of competing visions. The country chooses one or the other. We accept the choice the country made. I've said many times, you can't love your country only when you win. You can't love your neighbor only when you agree. Something I hope we can do, no matter who you voted for, is see each other not as adversaries, but as fellow Americans. Bring down the temperature. I also hope we can lay to rest the question about the integrity of the American electoral system. It is honest, it is fair, and it is transparent. And it can be trusted, win or lose. I also hope we can restore the respect for all our election workers who busted their necks and took risks at the outset. We should thank them. Thank them for staffing voting sites, counting the votes, and protecting the very integrity of the election. Many of them are volunteers who do it simply out of love for their country. And as they did their duty as citizens, I will do my duty as president. I'll fulfill my oath, and I will honor the Constitution. On January 20th, we'll have a peaceful transfer of power here in America. To all our incredible staff, supporters, cabinet members, all the people who've been hanging out with me for the last 4 years, God love you, as my mother would say. Thank you so much. You put so much into the past 4 years. I know it's a difficult time. You're hurting. I hear you and I see you. But don't forget all that we accomplished. It's been a historic presidency. Not because I'm president, because what we've done, what you've done. A presidency for all Americans. Much of the work we've done is already being felt by the American people, but the vast majority of it will not be felt over the next 10 years. We have legislation we passed that's just only now just really kicking in. We're going to see over $1 trillion worth of infrastructure work done, changing people's lives in rural communities and communities that are in real difficulty, because it takes time to get it done. And so much more. It's going to take time, but it's there. The road ahead is clear, assuming we sustain it. There's so much we can get done and will get done based on the way the legislation was passed. And it's truly historic. You know, we're leaving behind the strongest economy in the world. I know people are still hurting, but things are changing rapidly. Together, we've changed America for the better. Now we have 74 days to finish the term, our term. Let's make every day count. That's the responsibility we have to the American people. Look, folks, you all know it in your lives. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. Setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. We all get knocked down. But the measure of our character, as my dad would say, is how quickly we get back up. Remember, a defeat does not mean we are defeated. We lost this battle. The America of your dreams is calling for you to get back up. That's the story of America for over 240 years and counting. It's a story for all of us, not just some of us. The American experiment endures. We're going to be okay, but we need to stay engaged. We need to keep going. And above all, we need to keep the faith. I'm so proud to have worked with all of you. I really mean it. I sincerely mean it. God bless you all. God bless America. And may God protect our troops. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And that was Joe Biden there giving that hugely anticipated address to the United States, addressing the nation with that final speech there. And the standout line there for me was, you can't love your country only when you win. We were expecting, was he going to be gracious in defeat? And he said, we see our opponents not as our adversaries, but as fellow humans. He added, let's bring down the temperature. There were several times he referred to the fact we will now see a peaceful transition of power, which to me was a shrouded jibe perhaps at Donald Trump and last January the 6th. Chris Hope, what's your immediate response? I thought he was gracious in that final speech. What was your take?
Yeah, I think he was. I mean, I think he came across really well. I think he said the lines were quite good. You know, setbacks are unavoidable, but giving up is unforgivable. You know, Uncle Joe giving his wisdom out to the US. You can't love your country only when you win, and same with neighbours when you disagree. I think it was a timely speech. I mean, his actions since the election have said, almost, as you say, in sharp contrast to Trump's behaviour when he was entering the White House back in 2020. But I think it is showing us that it's, you know, he's trying to show the country, bring down temperature, this is what happened. I mean, in fact, there's nowhere the Dems can go on this. They have lost completely. It's not even a tight result. So he's basically really recognising the parlour state that party's in right now.
And Jennifer Ewing from Republicans Overseas UK. We need to bring down the temperature. It might have been something that could have been thought about during the campaign. I mean, constantly comparing Donald Trump to Adolf Hitler, calling him a fascist. And by the way, there might be a bit of a problem this side of the pond too, with a few things that our parliamentarians have been saying about Donald Trump. So calling for calm now. Easy after the event. There wasn't a great deal of calm during the campaign.
No, there wasn't. And look, that was an older gentleman that's clearly on his way out, so respect where respect is due with regards to that. However, as somebody that's been called ultra MAGA and a supporter of fascism and a person that's going to end democracy, I find it a bit rich that now that they lost in a landslide and what looks to be the popular vote as well, that we're now told to tone down the rhetoric. Let's keep in mind that, yes, Trump has also said unsavory things, but he didn't go after either Biden or Kamala Harris's voters. He never went after the people. And both Biden and Kamala Harris, and to be honest, a lot of the media in the UK and the US went after the Trump voters. And I think that is part of why you saw this landslide. People are sick and tired of being told that they're a racist or a misogynist or a this or a that, because they want to vote for President Trump's policies.
That was interesting in 2016 when Hillary Clinton called the Republicans deplorables. It became something actually that put a turbo boost under the Trump campaign at the time. And after that remark at Madison Square Gardens, Puerto Rico, a floating island of garbage. And then Joe Biden saying actually the real garbage are Republican voters. And then Donald Trump turns up in a garbage truck and wears a high-vis vest at his rally. It seemed that everything became judo energy, which he utilised. So the attacks of yore didn't land on the chin this time. But aside from that, what was your take on Joe Biden's address?
I think that the point there, he's sort of being very emollient about that. And I think when Donald Trump said that, that Joe Biden has become stupid, that Kamala Harris was born that way, I mean, that's disgraceful. You don't need... But look, there used to be a thing called the Newgate Calendar, which was printed every week, all the people who'd been hanged. And the line that they always had underneath it was, nothing so became him in his life as the leaving of it. And they always say, in every everyone, I used to read it regularly. They stopped publishing it in 1820. But look, and so I think that is one of the most distinct. That was almost Kennedy-esque, some of his comments. I have to say, his thing about defeat doesn't mean you've been defeated slightly confused me.
Because he was defeated.
Yeah. Well, they'll have to speak to the intern that wrote that speech. Actually, it does mean that by definition.
I think it might mean an AI one. I don't know. But look, let's give the man credit, and let's give America credit. Let's give them credit for everybody's been talking about a divided nation. I think we now have the blueprint for a united nation, and I profoundly hope that is the case. For not just for the sake of America, but for the sake of democracy. And I hope that some of the worst prognostications don't come true. I hope that he's not going to give away the Donbass and and actually remove any support for Zelensky. I hope all those things don't happen. But the reality is he's made his pitch, and I hope, and I think Donald Trump will actually respond in a similar civilised vein. I profoundly hope this is Donald Trump's opportunity to actually rise above, some of that rather sleazy, unpleasant rhetoric.
Chris,
and we heard that I think in Trump's speech the other night. He wasn't the angry Trump. He was the emollient Trump. And I wonder whether this might be maybe the high water mark, or whether the low water mark is when we sort of retreat slightly and we have this guy in charge who isn't going to be this crazy guy. Back in 2016, it was a different Trump. 8 years ago, he wasn't anywhere part of the Republican hierarchy, was he? He was someone on the outside looking in. In fact, one of his only friends was Nigel Farage back then, because he'd been left on his own by the main party. But I think you're seeing now a more emollient to Trump. And I think that those were to his credit, those remarks by Joe Biden. I think for our British viewers here watching this, we must never forget he's the monarch and the elected Prime Minister. We have our Prime Minister we mock, and we leave the King and or the Queen when she was alive often out of politics in a way, but he's almost doing his role as being head of state there with those remarks, those JFK-type remarks.
Jennifer, could I ask you something that leapt out? They said, now we have 74 days left. Let's make everything count. Can Joe Biden still create any mischief on the way out? Can he still do the equivalent of taking the light fittings politically? Can he pass something in quick time, which could be problematic for Donald Trump? Because we know Donald Trump is set to reverse a lot of Biden's orders on day one.
Well, sure, and let's, as Donald Trump has jokingly said, of course I'll be a dictator for one day, and I'll do two things. I will secure the southern border, and I will drill baby drill. And, I don't know how you feel about this. Didn't sound like you were in agreement, but, that's what we voted for. And the reason we've had, in any estimation, 10 million, 20 million, not legal, but illegal immigrants come through the southern border is because on day one of Harris and Biden administration, they put a line through all of Trump's southern border policies, thus letting in illegal immigrants. In 2015, Trump was called a racist and a fascist for talking about closing the southern border. And now we've had Kamala Harris, albeit it was too late, so nobody believed her, a couple weeks ago saying, sure, I'll be tough on the border. So, this whole thing is crazy. He will be able to move quite quickly on some of these things. And I have a feeling that by 2026, we will probably, which will be the midterms, if we might see a reverse in the House or the Senate, because Americans actually like to have kind of a mix, right? So they're going to have to work hard and
incumbency is no longer a benefit. We're going to see an enormous piece of theatre in January, because don't forget, Kamala Harris is going to have to certify this election, and that's going to be quite...
Well, they've changed the rules a little bit around that to actually protect against what happens. So it is changed a bit. Yes.
Can I ask you, Stephen? You've been in politics a long time. You've obviously been supportive of the Democratic Party for a long time. The final chapter of Joe Biden's presidential career obviously wasn't his finest. But how do you think, looking back, he'll be remembered for his political legacy as he approaches the final furlong now?
It'll be the same word over and over again: decency. He was a decent man, and people. I think somebody said of him the other day, he was a second-rate mind, but he had a sort of first-rate attitude. I think that the problem was that going right back to when he plagiarised one of Neil Kinnock's speeches, you remember, when he was standing for president. I thought, this is not actually the sharpest chisel in the toolkit we've got down here. But he's been a decent, emollient gentleman, very much in the old tradition.
And would have been beaten Hillary Clinton in 16.
Without a shadow.
Who would have beaten
Without-
Trump in 16. And had he fought that election campaign then, it was 4 years too late for him.
Yes, but I mean, this history of the Democrats from McCarthy and Hubert Humphrey over and over again, we've had unfortunate candidates.
OK.
Unlike the British Labour Party, I hasten to add.
OK, we have to leave it there. Thank you
With
very
one
much.
obvious exception.
Jennifer Ewing, spokesperson for the Republicans Overseas UK, thanks for today and indeed your entire contribution during this whole presidential campaign.
And for your magnificent dress.
Oh, thank you very much.
Stephen Pound, you never compliment me on my dresses. Stephen Pound and also, of course, Chris Hope. And I believe you've got a nice little juicy story for us there about Angela Rayner seems to have put her foot in it. We'll have more of that later on. And here's the big one. Don't miss this tonight at 7 p.m. He's back. Nigel Farage returns to GB News from the United States after supporting his friend Donald Trump. Now, Nigel, we're bringing you exclusively, look at him there, his first-hand account of that night, having been with Donald Trump on Tuesday, of course, at Mar-a-Lago, and with Elon Musk and the whole higher echelons of the Republican movement on that historic night when Donald Trump sensationally won the United States presidency for the second time. Nigel Farage will be in this very studio, in this very chair, giving his exclusive insight into that political night in history. You will not want to miss it. Now, moving on, have you been involved in a cash for crash scam? Well, if so, you're not the only one, as they have increased fourfold over the last year. Now, the practice involves deliberately driving a moped into another vehicle for bogus insurance claims. Now, to break this down for us, I'm joined now by the motoring journalist Danny Kelly, huge friend of the show. Danny, this absolutely boils my blood. It's people on the scam. It used to be Whiplash, now it's scooters. Tell us all about it.
Yeah, it used to be Whiplash, but the insurers, Martin, they clamped down on these bogus Whiplash claims because basically if you have a low-speed rear shunt at a roundabout and you have a group of lads and they all get out clutching their necks saying, oh, I've got Whiplash, well, the insurers have said, well, no, you haven't got Whiplash because it was at like 1 mile an hour. So they just simply won't pay out now. So what's going on now is that these scallywags, I shouldn't call them scallywags because that's a term of endearment, these mobsters, these thugs, what they do, Martin, they go and buy a snotty old 50cc moped off Auto Trader for 150 quid, already battered, already bruised, and then they go and insure it. You can get these weekly insurance policies for £20 a week, and then all of a sudden they're road legal. They wait until, and they profile their victims, Martin. They tend to look for single women. They tend to look for the school run, mum and dad coming back from the school run, for high-end cars, because they know a high-end car is likely to have proper insurance. And then they quite simply wait until you're not looking and drive into you. Yes, you heard me right. They drive into you. And then they get off their bikes, they roll around on the floor, they feign injury, and then they intimidate you into paying for the damage that was already on the bike. And these mobs, these gangsters, if you like, they're operating in London. 2,250 victims in the last 2 years in London, 4,000 nationwide, predominantly the Northwest and the East Midlands. Now, what's interesting is that the trade Bible, if you like, for motor insurers, the Insurance Times, and I quote directly, Martin, fraudsters largely are from the Brazilian community or with a Portuguese linguistic predominance. So that's really interesting. So you've got this this gang, this cartel, if you like, who've come over from South America and they're now plying their trades in an illegal manner. And it's very, very worrying because I tell you what, Martin, if you're a single woman with maybe a family on the school run, and if someone drives into you and then feigns injury and starts screaming at you saying, pay for that bike damage, which was already there, then you're likely to do so.
Of course, and this is attacking decent people who feel, shocked. They want to do the right thing. And as you said, 4,000 people, 21 insurers have pulled their data, saying this is an increasing problem. Happens a lot on roundabouts, quiet areas where there are no witnesses. Now, Danny, this kind of thing, as a public service, GB News viewers and listeners listening, how can we help them to stay safe and to get away from being scammed like this? How can we protect ourselves?
Well, two things, Martin. First of all, for those of us watching and listening who'll think, well, that's not going to happen to me. Well, it's actually adding £50 onto your insurance policy, whether it's happened to you or not. 50 nicker every 12 months because of these thugs. I would advise people, Martin, for 20, 25 quid to get a dash cam off Amazon, one for the front of the car, one for the rear of the car. And also the insurers say, listen, if you are targeted, stay in your car if necessary. You know, use your smartphone when you get out of the car, when you feel confident to get out of the car, maybe wait for some witnesses and then video and take photographs of what's happened. Because it's quite straightforward for insurers nowadays to put 2 and 2 together, just like they did for the traditional crash for cash with low-speed cars. They're now fighting back against these thugs on 2 wheels. And all they do, Martin, for £20, you can buy a temporary policy, then they're legit on the road, and then they can come after you with your insurance policy.
And Danny Kelly, I spoke to my taxi driver on the way in today. This has happened to his wife. He showed me pictures, and guess what? The driving licence that was supplied to her was Brazilian, and it was fake. It was a fake driving licence, and the guy wanted to do a cash deal. Of course he did. He said, oh, let's do a cash deal. Let's not go through insurers. I don't need to phone the police. She was scared. She was overwhelmed. But luckily, she told her husband. He told me, and I said, this is a complete scam. In fact, I'm doing it on my show today, and my man, Danny Kelly, will tell you how you can stay safe. Danny Kelly, you're a legend. Thank you very, very much.
Thanks,
this
pal.
is a problem, and we need to stamp it out. Thank you very, very much for joining us on the show. Always an absolute pleasure. Now, a village in Worcestershire has come together to do something extra special for the remembrance period, and we'll reveal it all next. They've been busy knitting. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
On the 8th of October at Battersea Arts Centre, a new orchestra launched its inaugural season. The orchestra, which is named Chromatica, is formed of some of the best young musicians in Britain. They're due to perform in traditional venues and in community spaces. The aim is to bring their youth and dynamism to a wide repertoire of music. Predominantly, they'll work with emerging conductors who will have the chance to shape the orchestra and its repertoire. To share her experiences of bringing the ensemble together, I'm joined by the violinist and Chromatica Orchestra lead, Maren Bosma. To what extent is this novel? To what extent is this new ground?
Well, new ground, it is new ground in a sense that this is a completely new orchestra. Obviously, in the current sort of cultural climate, it's not really easy to set up a new orchestra. And so in that sense, it's a novelty for us to kind of try and carve out our space in the current climate of musical orchestras and musicians in Britain.
Yes, I mean, it's quite odd in a way to think of a new orchestra because the ones that we have tend to be struggling and numbers indeed have been reduced. I used to be associated with an orchestra which unfortunately went under. You've got some private backing for this.
Yeah.
Why do you think the private backers have been willing to give you support? What is it that they see as your unique selling proposition?
Well, Chromatica Orchestra essentially is an early career orchestra. So we're formed of all sort of top musicians who've graduated in, say, the last sort of 5 to 10 years. Because everyone is of that generation, there is a sort of enthusiasm and dynamism that we bring to the stage I think is quite unique. The orchestra's mission, it's really focused on creating opportunities for young emerging musicians.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 5. I'm Martin Daubney here on GB News. Now, what a wonderful story this is. A village in Worcestershire has come together to do something extra special for the remembrance period this year. Thousands of poppies have been knitted by volunteers and hung 70 feet from the church tower in Inkborough, attracting visitors from all over the country. And that included GB News, because our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson has been to meet those behind this absolute belter of a masterpiece.
A sea of red sits on the horizon in this small Worcestershire village, draping the tower of this centuries-old church. In Inkborough, more than 200 people have come together to remember those who have fallen by knitting more than 6,200 poppies. The project came to life thanks to Tina Hill and Melanie Hart from the local Women's Institute, who asked people of all ages to help create the cascade. Melanie says it was emotional when the poppies were lifted into the air.
I was rather overwhelmed, actually. I don't think I had a dry eye all day for that day that it went up. As it went up, a silence went among the crowd that were watching it. It was just so poignant and so beautiful. We wanted to have the act of remembrance, but also we wanted to create a community project. So many people within the village and surrounding villages became involved with it. An elderly lady in the village, 92, I think she might be 93 now, she came along and sewed some poppies on as well. At the end of the day, we are remembering our fallen so that we can live with the freedom that we've got today.
All around this village are signs of remembrance and reminders of those who grew up here and sacrificed their lives in war. For knitter and Women's Institute member Sheila Williams, there's been a lot of excitement at what's been achieved.
Very proud indeed. We all got so excited. We've done 2,000, we've done 3,000. How many have we done now? Done 4,000, and it's just been exciting. My grandfather was killed in the First World War, and every Remembrance November I always think of him, and I did it mainly for him, but for all the other souls that were killed in conflict.
Once the poppies began to hang from the church tower, it wasn't just locals who wanted to see this 70-foot artwork.
We've been blown away by the interest that we've had. We just haven't been able to keep up with the cakes and coffee sometimes. People have come from as far as Devon and a little bit closer to home, Malvern, Cheltenham, that sort of area. So, yeah, we're just overwhelmed by the support and the interest that we've had.
This week, the country will come together to remember. But in Worcestershire, the act of remembrance has made this community even more tight-knit. Jack Carson, GB News.
Isn't that just magnificent? You know, it's just faith in humanity restored. You know, well done to Tina and Melanie, the Women's Institute there, everybody in Inkborough that took part in that. What a marvellous thing. And when it was hauled up there onto the church, you know, very, very moving for anybody who went to the Tower of London when all the poppies were cascading out of the tower onto all the ground around there. I went to that, I thought, oh, it won't be anything special. It was absolutely astonishing because it quantifies something, it physicalises something, it puts it there before you, and it makes you stop and it makes you think. And just outside Westminster Abbey there on the way into work, there are currently all the poppies out front, and in fact, an hour ago it closed. It was open to the public for 3 hours. And I keep seeing the regimental boys in the Westminster Arms opposite after my show. And it's just so wonderful to remember, so wonderful to never forget. Of course, Sunday is Remembrance Sunday. And in fact, later in my next hour, I'll be joined by a wonderful man, Peter Wright. I met him yesterday as a GB News viewer. We did a Meet the Presenters call, and he told me his story, a former Special Forces soldier who was shot in the head on the Syrian border, had to retire from the armed forces. Very, very concerned about the fact this Remembrance Sunday, there will be pro-Palestine protests on Remembrance Sunday, encroaching on the sacred day. He's not happy about it. I don't think many of you viewers are. We'll be talking about that in the next hour. And as I said here, still to come on Remembrance Sunday, those protests have been planned across the country. I think it's an incredible thing to do. The mob needs to take a day off. That's what he'll say to me. Let's see what you think. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel. Now here's your weather, Aidan McGibbon.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying gloomy for the rest of today. Low cloud and drizzle extensively. Some brighter spells, mostly to the north and northwest of higher ground because of the wind direction. Technical term for this weather, anticyclonic gloom. That's where low cloud gets trapped under high pressure and it stays in the same place for days on end, and that is indeed what we're seeing, with very little sun strength this time of year to lift the cloud. So the cloudy skies continue into the evening and overnight. Some clear spells continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps North Wales. Where that happens, temperatures dipping close to freezing, a few fog patches, but otherwise it's grey skies remaining and lows of 7 to 9 Celsius. Some drizzle about first thing Friday, especially across western parts of the country. So Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Wales. We'll see some hill fog and quite misty conditions in places. But the overcast skies continue effectively for much of the country. A few brighter spells there for northern parts of Northern Ireland and more especially northern Scotland. 1 or 2 fog patches in the glens, but they'll lift soon enough. And actually it's northern Scotland where we'll see the lowest temperatures first thing and then the highest temperatures by the afternoon because of the sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine there for northern Scotland for much of the day. We'll see some cloud breaks developing across northern England, southern Scotland, North Wales once again, but for the vast majority we keep the low-lying cloud, and it's going to feel a bit colder, I think, compared with Thursday, so 10 to 13 Celsius unless you get some sunshine, and then it's mid-teens. Into the evening, and it's more of the same effectively. One subtle difference is we'll see a bit more patchy rain arrive into the west, and actually we will see some rain crossing the country through the weekend, but that will clear the skies for Monday.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Jules Buckley. Well, the roadworks continue on the M6, so emergency repairs underway between Garstang 33 and Broughton. That's the M55 turn off junction 32. This all follows yesterday's multi-vehicle collision, so slow going. A lane closed north and southbound, and also on the M6, if you're heading north, Middlewich and Holmes Chapel at 18, up to Knutsford at 19, a lane shut, a collision in lane 1, causing queues back towards junction 17. Delays for the M27 eastbound in the roadworks, junction 5 to 7, so Southampton Airport towards Hedge End. There's a lane shut for a breakdown there. And between the Pevensey roundabout, that's the A27, and the Lamb Inn in Bexhill in East Sussex, the A259 closed both ways for investigation work there. We've seen queues through Watling as traffic diverts. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're giving you the chance to win everything you need to celebrate the festivities. There's £20,025 in tax-free cash. There's £5,000 to spend on gifts for all the family. There's £500 to spend in your favourite supermarket. And a festively themed GB News goodie bag. We'll get it all to you in time for the big day. For another chance to win, call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2, or post your name and number to GB09 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 22nd of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry. Tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe.
Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
A very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show here on GB News. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster for you and all across the UK. On today's show, Keir Starmer is in Hungary negotiating deals with Balkan nations to attempt to stop illegal immigration and return criminals. But will that come at a price, as it will have to be vetoed by the European Union's Ursula von der Leyen? Might this be another Brexit surrender in disguise? We'll be hearing from the Prime Minister within the next half an hour. And Joe Biden has just given his final address there outside the White House. He's called on the country to bring down the temperature in his first speech since Donald Trump's historic election victory yesterday. Speaking from the White House Rose Garden, Mr. Biden said he accepted the results of the election and would oversee a peaceful transfer of power. And armed forces veterans are furious that on Remembrance Sunday this weekend, pro-Palestine protests have also been planned in Birmingham, Liverpool and Bath, and also across Ireland. I'll be joined by a GB News viewer, a veteran who was almost killed in action in Syria, who thinks the mob just needs to take the day off. What's the show? Always a pleasure to have your company. What do you make of that? The idea that they think that it's acceptable to have a pro-Palestine protest on Poppy Day, on Remembrance Sunday, take the day off, a veteran will say that I'm just about to talk to. And I've got another little morsel for you. Take a look at this picture. Ready yourselves. Get it on the screen now here. This is Nigel Farage, exclusively pictured. Let's get it. Exclusively pictured with Donald Trump wearing Trump's Trump hat. That was taken from Mar-a-Lago, where, of course, Nigel Farage spent that historic night. And Nigel Farage has hot-footed it back to GB News. He's back at 7 p.m. tonight. Farage with the exclusive inside story from inside the Mar-a-Lago HQ of Team Trump on that amazing night when democracy fired Donald Trump back to the 47th president of the USA. Nigel Farage, live and unleashed, live here on GB News, 7 p.m. Set your alarms, get the beers ready. You will not want to miss it. Now get in touch, gbnews.com/your say. But before we kick off the final hour today, here's your news headlines, and it's Sophia Hill.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 5 o'clock. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. Our top story: in the last hour, President Joe Biden has told Americans to accept the choice Americans made and bring down the temperature, following Vice President Kamala Harris's defeat to Donald Trump in the US election. Speaking at the White House, the US president says the US electoral system is fair and that it can be trusted, and Americans must see each other as fellow Americans. With just 74 days until President-elect Donald Trump enters the White House, Biden reminded Americans of their responsibility to make the next weeks count.
For over 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails.
Back in the UK, the interest rate's been cut by 0.25%, only the second reduction in almost 4 years. The Bank of England cut the interest rates from 5% down to 4.75%. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says we need to make sure inflation stays close to target, so we can't cut interest rates too quickly or by too much. This cut follows initial cuts in August when inflation fell to its 2% target. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said with interest rates on a downward path, the Labour government is a world away from the last Parliament.
It's welcome news for millions of homeowners and businesses that interest rates have been cut today to 4.75%. I do, though, recognise that for many people who took out mortgages a few years ago, they're still looking at higher rates because of the spike in interest rates after the Conservative mini-budget 2 years ago.
Cheshire Police say MP Mike Amesbury has been charged with assault following an incident in Frodsham. A video had emerged of him appearing to punch a man to the ground. According to the police, the 55-year-old is set to appear in Magistrates' Court at a later date. The charge relates to a report of an assault on a 45-year-old man in Frodsham, which was reported to the police on the 26th of October. Mike Amesbury has said he's continuing to cooperate with the police after being summoned to court over a deeply regrettable incident. Sir Keir Starmer is set to sign a deal with Balkan nations to target people smuggling gangs as he heads to Hungary for the 5th EU summit. 46 European leaders will discuss issues including economic security as well as migration concerns. The Prime Minister has been holding bilateral meetings today with leaders of Poland and the Czech Republic. Meanwhile, the summit will also address Donald Trump's win as the bloc now focuses on how to accommodate the country's 47th president. And the UK has announced 56 new sanctions against Russia, including against the Salisbury poison suspect, Denis Sergeev. It's the biggest Russia sanctions package for 18 months, in a signal of support for Ukraine. The Foreign Office says sanctions will directly target the supply of goods to Russia's military and constrain vital resources crucial to conducting Putin's illegal war in Ukraine. A look at the medical world now, and a health watchdog says hormone replacement therapy should be the first treatment offered to women with symptoms of the menopause. The National Institute for Health and Care Excellence says HRT is the preferred recommended approach for tackling symptoms such as hot flashes, insomnia and low mood. The move comes after draft guidance published last November had suggested cognitive behavioural therapy designed to help people manage their problems by changing the way they think and behave could be offered either as an alternative to HRT or alongside it. And some royal news to end with. Prince William meets with volunteers at the National Sea Rescue Institute station in Simonstown near Cape Town as his 4-day royal tour comes to a close. The Prince of Wales is in South Africa to promote his Earthshot Environmental Prize, which held its annual awards ceremony in Cape Town on Wednesday night. The Prince of Wales will be a special guest at Cape Town Barbecue to draw to a close his South African tour. Those are the latest headlines for now. I'm Sphere Hill. More in half an hour.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Sophia. Now, Sir Keir Starmer is in Budapest today in Hungary for the European Community Summit, where he is expected to sign deals with several Balkan countries as part of his plan to smash the people smuggling gangs. At least that's the plan. But overshadowing that seems to be the issue of how far the newly elected US President Donald Trump will continue or not to support Ukraine. And let's speak now to GB News' home and security editor, Mark White. Mark, welcome to the show. So Sir Keir Starmer was who we were expecting to hear from very, very shortly. He wanted this to be about Balkan nations. He wanted this to be about trying to smash the gangs going further downstream. But events have entirely been overtaken by the fact they seem to be completely getting their knickers in a twist by the fact President Donald Trump, of course, will be the next president. And what will he do with Ukraine? He said he wants to end the war within 24 hours. And that would make all of this sort of redundant.
Yeah, I think certainly there'll be a lot of sobbing into their Hungarian beers this evening. Having said that, Viktor Orban, the Hungarian Prime Minister and the host of this summit, I'm sure will be absolutely delighted that his friend is back in the Oval Office, or at least will be from January next year. And I think there is a great deal of concern, really, amongst these European leaders as to what President Trump, the 47th President Trump, will do with regard in particular to Ukraine. Because he said already, of course, if he was in office, he would have that war ended within 24 hours, 48 hours, however the turn of phrase was. So it's clear that he wants to get both sides around the table. But the difficulty with that is Vladimir Putin really isn't going to accept a deal where he doesn't get to keep the vast majority of the territory that he has gained over the last couple of years. And that would be completely unacceptable to Volodymyr Zelensky. So if that were the case, of course, he would be attempting to go it alone with only European support. And are the Europeans really up to supporting this endeavour without the Americans? Well, they're not really. You've got Germany, for instance, that's seen its government, the coalition government, collapse just in the last day. They're preoccupied with other things at the moment. Germany and the UK are the biggest European donators to the Ukrainian military endeavour, but really Europe on its own just wouldn't be able to do that. With America's help, Ukraine is only just managing to keep Russia from advancing very significantly into its territory. So some very worrying times ahead, I think, for these European leaders as to what they'll find with the new Donald Trump in the Oval Office. Remember, of course, it was Donald Trump that lambasted many of these European leaders over not spending enough on their own military. Well, ironically, of course, the Ukrainian war has meant that many of those European countries are now belatedly spending significant sums on their own security because they realise there is a significant threat out there and they can't always rely on America.
You know, Mark White, you're absolutely right. It's meant to be 2% of GDP that's paid into NATO by all these countries. Germany, 1.57. Italy, 1.46. Canada, 1.38. Spain, 1.26. Maybe if they want Europe to be a safer place, they need to put their hands in their pockets. Mark White, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure. And joining us now is the former Conservative MEP, David Campbell-Bannerman. Welcome to the show, David. Always an absolute pleasure to have your company. Shall we continue that conversation if we could? There's going to be a lot of squeaky bums, aren't there, at this European conference today about the fact Donald Trump is back in power. It's their worst nightmare in a way. They can barely contain their loathing for him, at least the vast majority of them. And they are entirely, as a bloc, supportive to the hilt of Ukraine. And here we have now an incoming president, literally incoming, who doesn't necessarily agree with that. We could see a scattergun approach here to a new world order. And once again, we might find the European Union is simply looking a bit redundant.
Well, thanks, Martin. Yeah, I mean, it was a wonderful night, wasn't it? And what an amazing achievement to come back, President Trump coming back that way. Yeah, well, I mean, to be honest, what the EU is up to now is just saying that, well, Trump hates NATO, wants to get rid of NATO. That's not the case. It's not true. They're using that as an excuse to say we need to spend more on defense directly in Europe and to back the EU army. It's not the case. What Trump will do is shake things up again, as he did before, and he'll demand 3% of GDP, not 2% of GDP this time. And that's a good thing. You know, he's strengthening NATO by getting them to put more money in. And that isn't destroying NATO, that's strengthening NATO. And that is a far better route than relying on the EU. I mean, you know, 70% of NATO spending is American anyway, USA. Plus you've got Canada. You don't want to drive those people away and be left with, frankly, a rather pathetic force against Russia as a potential aggressor.
And that's the whole point. I mean, we know Ursula von der Leyen would love there to be a European Union army, something Nick Clegg dismissed as a dangerous fantasy back in 2015. Well, when I was an MEP in 2019, von der Leyen gave her maiden speech specifically saying we would like there to be a European Union army as almost a cut-price NATO. Well, now Donald Trump's going to come in and say there's no such thing as a cut-price NATO. In fact, you're going to have to dig much, much deeper. But can we talk briefly, if we can, and we're expecting to hear from the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, very shortly. When we've got that, we'll bring that to you here on GB News, about this deal today with Balkan nations downstream to try and get them to do their bit to stop the people smuggling gangs and the immigrants who come in across from the Middle East through those Balkan nations and get their way towards Calais. Do you think these kind of treaties have any real teeth?
Well, I don't see any mention of returns. I see intelligence cooperation. They are, by the way, all three non-EU countries. They want to join the EU, like Serbia, for example, Kosovo, North Macedonia. But no, there doesn't seem to be anything about returns, because the Albania deal, which is quite similar, had returns in it, and you could actually send people back. And that would be a deterrent. And we don't seem to have a deterrent. And Starmer, the Labour government, don't seem to believe in deterrence. They got rid of Rwanda, which was a potential deterrent and never really was allowed to happen. And they haven't put a deterrence back in place. They've just put in more, border forces and this sort of thing, which, but you do need a deterrence.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, because the previous UK-Albania agreement on illegal migration, there was over 12,000 Albanians came in 2022. That literally stopped overnight when we had a returns agreement. 1,000 was also deported. And do you know that Albanians are 14.5 times more likely to be in British jails than Brits? Kosovans, a deal we're trying to do today, 9 times more likely to be in British jails. So a lot of people should be sent back home, and I don't think that's going to happen in this plan. You're exactly right, David. This is an intelligence sharing device, but let's face it, we could have been doing that years ago. In fact, we probably have been. But David Campbell-Bannerman, we have to leave it there now, because we do now have, I believe, that clip from Sir Keir Starmer, because moments ago, Keir Starmer met with Ukrainian President Zelensky at the Hungarian summit. We'll bring you more updates on this, and here it is. And there he is shaking hands. Of course, President Zelensky was one of the very first to congratulate President Trump. Perhaps they won't have seen eye to eye in the past, but let's face it, these are people with a vested interest in getting on with whoever happens to be in power. Two very, very different approaches on the table here. Of course, Sir Keir Starmer's approach is to back Ukraine to the hilt financially ad infinitum by looks of it. £3 billion a year is the contribution at the European Community Summit. Everybody there seems to be of one mindset, full support, but it seems Donald Trump, who's now about to be made the 47th president, might have a very, very different approach. Well, which approach will end up currying favour? We'll have to wait and see. Now, still to come, is Trump Starmer's worst nightmare? Well, I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Online dating apps are still the go-to for millions of British adults, with 1 in 10 using them to look for a romantic connection.
Yes, are you one of them? Let us know. But with many apps introducing subscription fees and complex algorithms, the world of online dating has never been harder to navigate. So who better to join us to discuss this than Mr. Tinder himself, Stéphane Pierre Tomlin. You have been dubbed Britain's best-looking eligible bachelor.
Yeah, so this happened back in 2016. Got an email from Tinder, and it was like, "You're the most swiped man on Tinder."
So just explain to us, for viewers who don't know, what is swiping? What does that mean on Tinder?
Yeah, so on Tinder, the app, if you swipe left, that means you don't like the person in front of you, and if you swipe to the right, that means you like that person.
Do you mind still being associated with that? It's a good thing.
Well, it made me who I am now, and I love sharing how I was successful, and now I'm like a dating expert.
What's your situation now? Are you with anyone? Are you still single, paying the bill?
So I'm seeing someone at the minute. Things are going well, and I'm a dating expert, so I'm always giving advice to people
Does she know your title of most swiped?
Of course, who doesn't?
Yeah,
It's quite hard. It's quite hard being the most swiped man on Tinder because you get a label on you. So I find it harder than anyone else, to be honest.
And where did you meet her? That's the big question.
At an event.
So not on Tinder?
Not on Tinder, ironically. Yeah.
So for All About Troubled Online, it's actually a real life rendezvous. Which,
I mean, I have met people on Tinder in the past, and it has worked. Well, it didn't work, but yeah.
I need to know how to do the famous Stefan Smolder.
That camera is not a camera. That is your best friend, that's your lover. So you really smiles from the camera, so it goes like this.
GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's 5:20. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, joining me now in the studio is our political editor, Chris Hope, who has some breaking news. And, Chris, it seems that once again a Labour senior member has completely put their foot in it over Donald Trump. Tell us more.
Yeah, these are historic comments. Now, it's almost a Mount Rushmore of,
clowns.
Clowns, you might argue, people who want to have a government in the Labour Party, but say things about, someone who could be, or was the leader at the time of our biggest ally, and think it doesn't matter. These things do matter. The internet doesn't forget. We know David Lammy called Donald Trump a serial liar and a cheat, a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Wes Struting called an odious little man. Ed Miliband, a racist, misogynistic, self-confessed something or other. Well, now we hear from Angela Rayner, who, of course, is Labour's deputy leader. She said back in the day when COVID was a big issue, now, of course, Deputy Prime Minister Mr Trump was an embarrassment, unbelievable, and the phony president. She said at the time, we've got the highest death rate in Europe because of COVID, and he said that Trump was killing Americans. He's an absolute buffoon. She said then, he has no place in the White House. He's an embarrassment and should be ashamed of himself. Now, at the time, of course, there was conflicting advice on how to deal with COVID, but really, these people who are the leader, the opposition party, some of them are paid money in those roles, certainly as Sir Keir Starmer is, to be the leader of a party that may replace the current government. Why they're calling people like that an embarrassment, the internet does not forget. Yeah. It's out there all the time. That was in a TV interview. All this stuff is new again because we've got Trump in the White House.
And it's incredible, actually, it's taken this long for this to be exhumed. And it begs the question, how many more bodies are buried out there? How many other idiotic comments have been made by
a lot,
the Labour Party about Donald Trump?
But it's not just David Lammy. I know lots of folks on David Lammy. He's a foreign secretary. He's our chief diplomat who faces the US and tries to talk to people in the Trump regime. But there's other people too. And I think it shows to me a lack of seriousness around some of these individuals. Now they're in government, of course, they changed their tune. But back then, they should really be holding their tongue when just thinking about people who could be our most important ally in the world.
When you start to add this, as you call it, the Mount Rushmore of clowns, when you start to look at this panoramic vision of the people who represent, they're the top draw, they're the top flight of the Labour Party. Deputy leader, Foreign Secretary, Environment Secretary, Health Minister. Now, this is the top team. How do you think... obviously, Donald Trump's got much more important things to think about now than all of this. But nevertheless, when the in-tray marks Great Britain is in front of Donald Trump, he's going to look at this and think, well, why should I deal with these people? They clearly don't like me.
Well, it's such a big worry. Now, because of Brexit, we're outside our nearest trading bloc, the European Union. If Trump comes in, he's called himself Mr. Tariff. If he brings in tariffs on European exports into the US, where does the UK fit in that? We're outside the European Union. We've got a chance to negotiate our own preferential terms to that market over and above the EU. Will that happen? I don't know. We see that, don't we? Sir Keir Starmer, he's at this European European political community meeting on mainland Europe. We'll hear from him very shortly in GB News. But we've got a chance here, I think, to try and, to be outside that. But it doesn't help with these, frankly, silly remarks, student politics remarks made in opposition.
And I think, actually, we've got the clip of Angela Rayner putting her foot in it now. Let's take a little butchers.
Oh.
Trump is killing, thousands of Americans by giving them duff advice, and his macho, I'm all right, look at me, I've survived COVID, is an absolute buffoon. He has no place in the White House. He's an embarrassment, and he should be ashamed of himself, especially when thousands of Americans have died.
Part of you just feels like headbutting the desk.
Yeah.
Part of you feels like biting the table. It's like these people were in opposition.
Yeah.
Do you think this was just like performative, this is what you do, and did you think that they never really thought they'd get into power because or they thought Donald Trump would be consigned to history, or both, or what?
Let's be fair to Angela Rayner. The date of that is 2020. Boris Johnson was months into his 80-seat majority. He was forecast to win 2 terms in power. Many said there's no challenge to that until really late 2021 when the first Partygate stirrings happened. And by then he had gone, of course, within 2 years. So, yeah, that was then. I mean, I just think that a serious party has to make serious comments about our biggest ally, and I think there was a mistake there. It was at the height of COVID. The drawbridge being pulled up. It was unclear what was the best answer. People were emotional about COVID, but even so, I think these remarks are difficult to see even now.
But David Lammy's comments weren't about COVID.
No,
they were about something completely different. Ed Miliband's comments weren't about COVID. I appreciate what you're saying, but this is a range of different contexts, a range of different timescales, and a range of different parliamentarians, all of whom happen to be at the top table. I just say to you again, if I were Trump, look at this, I'd think, well, I don't want to deal with these people. They don't like me.
Yeah, I'm getting conflicted. I mean, we'll hear more from Nigel Farage, of course, is the official Trump whisperer who's been speaking to Donald Trump much more than anyone in government at 7 p.m. on GB News tonight. He might know more on this. Trump is he's both thin-skinned, but also he's pragmatic. He's thin-skinned. He hates his remarks, as I would if I were him. He's a deal maker, a pragmatic deal maker. He knows that things are said in the heat of battle, but I want to get a deal with these guys. He may use those words against the UK in talks, but at the end of the day, he's a money man. I'm sure he won't let them stop a deal with Britain if he has to.
And of course, J.D. Vance, who's now his VP, his vice president, he called Donald Trump in the past a fascist.
Well, quite.
Yeah, but you forgive and forgave.
But he needed Vance for the re-election process. So when he needs someone, he's willing to overlook it. It doesn't make life easier, Martin. That's the point.
As you said, Nigel Farage will be in this very hot seat tonight at 7 o'clock. But we've got that picture there of Nigel Farage wearing Donald Trump's Trump hat at Mar-a-Lago on that historic night. He'll be back with the first exclusive inside story. There he is, wearing Trump's Trump hat on that historic night. What will come out tonight? Well, you have to tune in, won't you? 7 p.m. GB News. You will not want to miss it. Thank you very much for joining me here, Chris Hope. And let's move on quickly now, because President Joe Biden has declared that there will be a peaceful and orderly transfer of power as Donald Trump takes control of the United States of America. And joining us now is Eric McElroy, who's a spokesman for Democrats Abroad UK. Eric, welcome to the show. A hugely anticipated speech by Joe Biden addressing the nation. Lots of mention of power will transition peacefully. That was a clearly veiled pop at Donald Trump, wasn't it?
Well, it's funny that we're in an era where that is a veiled pop, and under any other president transitioning than before Donald Trump, that wouldn't be considered any sort of a pop. That was a hallmark of the American democracy until Donald Trump. And so the fact that the Democrats are doing this, that's what we stand for. That's what we're about. We've accepted the results of the election. We're obviously not happy about it because I'm a Democrat and I believe in the values of Kamala Harris and I believed in the campaign that they ran. But it's a free and fair election. We've accepted the results. You're not going to see us storming the Capitol anytime soon, even though we're unhappy. You know, we'll look onwards. The midterms are just around the corner. That's the nice thing about American politics, is there's always an election coming. And so the fight continues there.
And Eric, Joe Biden also say you can't love your country only when you win, but there does seem to be a lot of problems with accepting this result from the liberal America, from the Democrats, certainly from the liberal media. Donald Trump always had a chance of winning. I mean, there are only two people in the race. He has won. Do you think it's been the beginnings of the world's biggest temper tantrum? Why are liberals such sore losers?
Well, I don't think they are. I mean, I know that, you know, some of the article that was in the Daily Mail about the comedians on the late night comedy shows talking about the loss. But some of the things, they made jokes. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to make jokes about the people in power. They made jokes about Biden.
They were crying.
Yeah, because it's an emotional time. Comedians have emotions too, Martin. We believe, you know, we care and we have a stake in this. I'm also a stand-up comedian as well as being part of Democrats Abroad. So we do have emotions other than laughter. But Stephen Colbert did say that this is a democracy and the majority has spoken. Jimmy Kimmel, who got emotional because he cares about his country and is worried about some of the people that we think that Trump will hurt with his administration, as we've seen him hurt in his previous administration. He said that in January, Donald Trump will become president. And it doesn't mean that we're going to storm the Capitol because we didn't like the result. And again, before Donald Trump and the mega movement, that had never happened before. And I never want to see that happen to the country that I'm from again.
I think we can all agree on that. Another comment that leapt out of Joe Biden's speech today at the White House and the Rose Garden, he said, let's bring down the temperature. They think that's a bit rich when only last week, Joe Biden said that Republican supporters were garbage in response to that floating island of garbage comment made by a stand-up comedian, you know, a stand-up comedian who makes an inappropriate joke. That's what they do. Nevertheless, it was seized upon. And in this campaign, it was an incredibly negative campaign. Once again, Groundhog Day, echoes of 2020, echoes of 2016, Adolf Hitler, fascism. I mean, seriously, do you think that's the rhetoric of dialing down the nation? Do you think actually that kind of approach from the Democrats is what's helped to make America so divided?
I mean, I think it's pretty laughable to say the Democrats are the ones that have an issue with name calling when you're looking at Donald Trump. I mean, there's a long litany of people that he's mocked, from people with disabilities to comments that he's made about people of color, to claiming that legal migrants in America were illegal and were eating cats and dogs. And after that comment from Biden, where he clarified he wasn't trying to say Trump supporters, he was trying to talk about the comedian, Biden misspoke quite a bit, as we saw, and he admitted that. The J.D. Vance, following that comment where people were allegedly offended about the garbage thing, J.D. Vance called the vice president of the United States trash in a speech. And that was one of his final remarks before the vote. So rhetoric-wise, it's an election, it's heated, but I think that the idea that we hopefully go forward, and, I didn't want Trump to be president again, but I do hope for the best. I hope that the country can come together. That's what we do want to have happen. I don't want to see America fail, because if America fails, we all fail. And that's an important thing to go forward.
Eric, do you think the Democrats need to completely rethink your approach to politics, identity politics, net zero, getting rid of self-sufficiency of petrochemicals? It's been absolutely rejected by the electorate. It was a landslide. Astonishingly, Donald Trump is more popular in terms of the vote, in terms of the final votes, than JFK in 1960.
I mean, there's a lot of things that are in the Democratic agenda which are popular. And if you separate out the politicians, it's usually they go for those things which the messaging maybe is the problem that we have there. There were states where the abortion bans had been put into place because of the actions of Donald Trump, and those passed to protect women's right to choose. But people also then didn't support some of the Democratic candidates in those races who are going to make sure that a national ban never happens. So there is a disconnect there that is, something that we have to work on, obviously, because in politics, as you need to win to make the change that you want to see happen.
Okay, thank you for being so gracious today. Thanks for joining us on the show. Eric McElroy, the spokesman for Democrats Abroad UK and a stand-up comic. Very best of British. Thanks for joining us here on GB News. And lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock, including a GB News viewer, a veteran who is in the Special Forces, who was almost killed in action, gives us his thoughts about pro-Palestine marches organised on Remembrance Sunday this weekend. First, here's your latest news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Good afternoon. It's just gone 5:30. I'm Sophia Hill in the GB newsroom. The top story: in the last hour, President Joe Biden has told Americans to accept the choice Americans made and bring down the temperature following Vice President Kamala Harris's defeat to Donald Trump in the US election. Speaking at the White House, the president said the US electoral system is fair and can be trusted, and that Americans must see each other as fellow Americans. With just 74 days until President-elect Donald Trump enters the White House, Biden reminded Americans of their responsibility to make the next few weeks count.
For 200 years, America has carried on the greatest experiment in self-government in the history of the world. And that's not hyperbole, that's a fact. We're the people. The people vote and choose their own leaders, and they do it peacefully. And we're in a democracy. The will of the people always prevails. Yesterday, I spoke with President-elect Trump to congratulate him on his victory. And I assured him that I'd direct my entire administration to work with his team to ensure a peaceful and orderly.
Back in the UK, the interest rate's been cut by 0.25%, only the second reduction in almost 4 years. The Bank of England cut interest rates from 5% to 4.75%. Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey says we need to make sure inflation stays close to target, so we can't cut interest rates too quickly or by too much. This cut follows initial cuts in August when inflation fell to its 2% target. Chancellor Rachel Reeves said with interest rates on a downward path, the Labour government is a world away from the last parliament.
It's welcome news for millions of homeowners and businesses that interest rates have been cut today to 4.75%. I do, though, recognise that for many people who took out mortgages a few years ago, they're still looking at higher rates because of the spike in interest rates after the Conservative mini-budget 2 years ago.
Sir Keir Starmer is set to sign a deal with Balkan nations to target people smuggling gangs in Hungary for the 5th EU summit. 46 European leaders will discuss issues including economic security as well as migration concerns. The Prime Minister has been holding bilateral meetings with European leaders today, including President Zelensky. Meanwhile, the summit will also address Donald Trump's win as the bloc now focuses on how to accommodate this country's 47th president. And some royal news to end. Prince William has met with volunteers at the National Sea Rescue Institute station near Cape Town as his 4-day royal tour comes to a close. The Prince of Wales is in South Africa to promote his Earthshot Environmental Prize, which held its annual awards ceremony in Cape Town on Wednesday night. The Prince of Wales will be a special guest at a Cape Town barbecue to draw to a close his tour of South Africa. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Sphere Hill. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying gloomy for the rest of today. Low cloud and drizzle extensively. Some brighter spells, mostly to the north and northwest of higher ground because of the wind direction. Technical term for this weather, anticyclonic gloom. That's where low cloud gets trapped under high pressure and it stays in the same place for days on end, and that is indeed what we're seeing, with very little sun strength this time of year to lift the cloud. So the cloudy skies continue into the evening and overnight. Some clear spells continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps North Wales. Where that happens, temperatures dipping close to freezing, a few fog patches, but otherwise it's grey skies remaining and lows of 7 to 9 Celsius. Some drizzle about first thing Friday, especially across western parts of the country. So Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Wales. We'll see some hill fog and quite misty conditions in places. But the overcast skies continue effectively for much of the country. A few brighter spells there for northern parts of Northern Ireland and more especially northern Scotland. 1 or 2 fog patches in the glens, but they'll lift soon enough. And actually it's northern Scotland where we'll see the lowest temperatures first thing and then the highest temperatures by the afternoon because of the sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine there for northern Scotland for much of the day. We'll see some cloud breaks developing across northern England, southern Scotland, North Wales once again. But for the vast majority, we keep the low-lying cloud, and it's going to feel a bit colder, I think, compared with Thursday. So 10 to 13 Celsius, unless you get some sunshine, and then it's mid-teens. into the evening, and it's more of the same effectively. One subtle difference is we'll see a bit more patchy rain arrive into the west, and actually we will see some rain crossing the country through the weekend, but that will clear the skies for Monday.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. The western stretch of the M25 is down to one lane on that four-lane stretch. Clockwise, everyone's been funneled into the outside lane where a car's overturned just north of the M40. I can see on the cameras the queues held back past the M4 currently. In southwest London, this is just south of Wandsworth at Earlsfield, Garrett Lane is closed at the scene of an accident. And in East London at Chingford Mountain Road, closed following a collision off Normanshire Drive. East Sussex, northeast of Pevensey, the A259 closed from the A27 and the Wheatsheaf Inn west of Bexhill for accident investigation work. In Cornwall, the A30 Bodmin bypass shut following a serious accident, and there was a reduced service on northern trains eastbound at South Bank for emergency engineering works. And that's near Middlesbrough, of course. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, on Remembrance Sunday this weekend, pro-Palestine protests have also been planned in Birmingham, Liverpool, Bath and also across Ireland. Posters like this have sparked outrage, as this Sunday is also, of course, dedicated to veterans and the war dead who gave their lives for us in conflicts for Britain around the world. Let's get the thoughts now of a GB News viewer and a former member of the Special Forces, Peter Wright. Peter, welcome to the show. I met you yesterday, of course, for the first time. We had a Meet the Presenters Zoom call, and you asked me a question specifically about these events, and I said, look, we're covering this on the show tomorrow. Please will you come on, and here you are. So thank you so much for agreeing to do that, and thank you for your service in the armed forces. And before we get on to the protests, which I know have caused you some concern this weekend, can you tell us a bit about your service and indeed that ferocious wound you received you told me about?
Okay, yeah, certainly. I joined at an early age, 15 years and 8 months.
Wow.
And left the army at about 93. So joined in the went in the first Gulf War. So between that, being part of the Royal Corps of Signals, which is fantastic, we was doing lots of trades like looking after power, looking after people. Then we did selection, and then we joined 264, which is a very, very elite squad, not mentioned a lot of. We tried our best to defend the country. I was in Northern Ireland. I met the IRA. I met Jerry Adams. And it was not pleasant, especially after they got amnesty. And then Paddy McGuinness, he became an MP, a leader of DUP. Wow, you know. I'm still getting issues with Ireland wanting retribution for soldiers.
Yeah. And Peter, could I ask you about, I know you sent through to me an X-ray. I don't know if we have that picture now. This is an X-ray of your brain.
Yes.
You were shot, right? You were shot on the Syrian border. Am I correct in saying? Yeah. Tell us about that. We'll get that image on the screen in a minute. Tell us about that.
Well, basically, I got the Americans came down and shot at the wrong convoy. They shot at their own Bradley tank, and we're using a British APC armoured personnel carrier, and they blew up the Bradley tank. Everyone dead. We had 6 survivors on our APC. I was one of them, and I got shrapnel straight through my neck, straight into temporal lobe. It's not a complete bullet, it's a bill of lead, which is very, very similar. And I had morphine, got carried off the battlefield. We had to do a 6.5 mile tab to get picked up. And then I spent a whole year convalescing. I couldn't speak, I couldn't move. It was horrible. And because I was in Germany, RAF Egberg, nobody could visit me. So it was terrible.
Peter, we can see that X-ray now. I believe that black mark in the centre there, that is basically a bullet, and that's still in your brain now. So, Peter, we've set the context. You're literally an incredible man who's risked everything for your country, almost took your life, and I know it's had profound impact on your mental health and your well-being, so on and so forth, since that day. Let's now, if we can, talk about these planned protests on Remembrance Sunday. And as somebody who almost died for your country, as somebody who I know places a huge amount of honour and importance upon Remembrance Sunday, Peter Wright, how does it make you feel when you see these pro-Palestine protests for the same day on Remembrance Sunday?
To be honest, disgusted. I feel let down. I feel humiliated. My friends and I, who we served with, which we're still in contact with, have the same opinion. You know, it's not an ideology. It's a place where we can remember friends and colleagues that didn't make it. And that is, for me, unlawful in the spirit and the letter of the law.
And you have no problem, like a great many people. I mean, look, these Palestine protests have been happening every weekend since October the 7th last year. They've almost become a part of the fabric of British society, whether we like it or not. But I think, Peter Wright, your point is quite simple, and that is just don't do it on Remembrance Sunday, right?
Well, they can do a Remembrance Sunday, but nowhere near where we are gathering to remember our dead. They can do it in places where no one's there, or Speaker's Corner, or anywhere else. They can do it, no problem. But other than that, don't insult us. Don't.
Do you think in many ways, Peter, this is symptomatic now of the way Britain has become? Is there a feeling that nothing British is any longer sacred?
Yes, I feel that we've been let down so much by government that, especially now, when we heard a week ago or so, that they want to come over just to meet Keir Starmer. And that is frightening. So something's got to happen. If not, there'll be more riots.
OK, Peter Wright, we have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much, former member of the Special Forces. Thank you for your service. And also, of course, just to add, none of us, of course, want any more riots. Thank you very much for joining us, GB News viewer there, Peter Wright. Now, I've got a quick statement. The West Midlands Police and Avon and Somerset Police told GB News that no event has been confirmed for this week and are contacting organisers for more information, while police in Ireland say they respect the right for citizens to exercise their constitutional rights and have no role to permit or authorise these gatherings. Now, we also contacted Merseyside Police but received no reply. But Liverpool Friends of Palestine have confirmed that a march will go ahead, and they told us never again should mean never again. Our call for a ceasefire is precisely what should be heard on Remembrance Sunday. Well, Keir Starmer has been speaking to reporters in Hungary about everything from Trump to migrants, and we'll bring you all of that next. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
We all know that pensioners will freeze to death this winter because of the cruel cut to the winter fuel payment, rising council tax, the energy price cap going up, all of that. Now, instead of looking after them, we appear to have a government that seems to want to make their lives worse. Now, they might not care, but you do. And thanks to you, I have now raised more than £270,000 for Friends of the Elderly. You have raised more than the entire amount they gave away in grants for the most desperate pensioners last year. So amazing effort. Thank you very much. Now, I said I'd do a freezing cold swim to raise awareness for how cold some pensioners will be in their own homes this winter. And on Saturday, I went to Stickle Tarn in the Lake District. I'd like to give a massive thank you to the people who turned up to meet me along the way. I would also like to give a monumental shout out to the wonderful camera crew. We've got John Clark and Joe Scowen, and our health and safety maestro, known only as the Stag. I come up with these crackpot ideas, but it is down to those wonderful people to make them actually happen. I would also like to give you a little warning. There are aspects of this footage that you will not be able to unsee. I am aware that at times my body resembles a bag of milk. But you know what? If me embarrassing myself helps to raise a bit more money, then so be it. And you can go to justgiving.com/page/Save Our Seniors now to donate.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 10 to 6. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has been in Budapest today in Hungary for a European Leaders Summit, where he's been speaking to reporters. Let's take a listen.
These agreements with West Balkan countries are very important. There are additional agreements about unlawful migration. And here at the meeting here today, the European political community, that's been a major feature, which is how do we take down the gangs that are running this vile trade of smuggling people across borders, in particular for us, the concern about those that are crossing the channel. I'm determined we're going to smash those gangs, and these agreements today are about sharing intelligence, sharing data, and the conversation today. I chaired the round table here today. The conversation was about how we then turn those into the operations that we need to intercept the gangs, the groups that are running this, making a huge amount of money, all along the routes that they're using for people smuggling. And I'm absolutely determined that with agreements like this, we can take these gangs down.
On Donald Trump, what's the consensus here? Is this good or bad for Europe and Ukraine specifically?
Well, I've just come from a meeting with President Zelensky, and that's my 6th time of meeting him since I've been Prime Minister, 6th time I've had to sit down with him and discuss the situation. It was an opportunity for me to repeat and affirm our ironclad support of Ukraine. And the broader point here in Hungary at this meeting has been that this isn't just about the sovereignty of Ukraine, although of course it is about that. It's also about our freedom, our democracy and our values, and that's why it was very important for me today to have that further conversation with President Zelensky and reiterate just how ironclad the UK support is for Ukraine.
On defence spending, clearly Europe needs to spend more. When is Britain going to get to 2.5%?
I was very pleased that at the budget last week we were able to set out £2.9 billion of additional spending on defence. That's really important that that money is available, as it will be now, as according to the budget. We are committed to the pathway to 2.5% because there's nothing more important than the safety of our country and the national security of our country. So that remains the commitment. But last week in the budget, it was really important for us to put down that extra £2.9 billion for defence.
And just finally,
And there we go. That was Keir Starmer today in Budapest at the European Political Community Summit. I wonder, whatever they say there, will it be made obsolete by Donald Trump getting into power? Will he deal with the situation in Ukraine and render this lot pretty much obsolete? That remains to be seen. Now, we've got the results of the poll of the day therein. The question was this: do you think Donald Trump's win is good for Britain? 92% of you said yes, 5% said no, and 3% said not sure. Now, don't forget, Jubes & Co is up next, but we've got Nigel Farage. He is back. Let's get that picture on the screen. Nigel Farage, of course, spent that historic night with Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at Mar-a-Lago. We've got a picture of him wearing Donald Trump's Trump baseball cap. If the hat fits, wear it. Nigel Farage with Donald Trump. He's back in this studio from 7 till 8 p.m. Nigel's back. There he is, 7 till 8. I'll see you tomorrow, 3 till 6. Martin Daubney. Good night.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Staying gloomy for the rest of today. Low cloud and drizzle extensively. Some brighter spells, mostly to the north and northwest of higher ground because of the wind direction. Technical term for this weather, anticyclonic gloom. That's where low cloud gets trapped under high pressure and it stays in the same place for days on end, and that is indeed what we're seeing, with very little sun strength this time of year to lift the cloud. So the cloudy skies continue into the evening and overnight. Some clear spells continuing across northern Scotland, perhaps North Wales. Where that happens, temperatures dipping close to freezing, a few fog patches, but otherwise it's grey skies remaining and lows of 7 to 9 Celsius. Some drizzle about first thing Friday, especially across western parts of the country. So Devon, Cornwall, Somerset, Wales. We'll see some hill fog and quite misty conditions in places. But the overcast skies continue effectively for much of the country. A few brighter spells there for northern parts of Northern Ireland and more especially northern Scotland. 1 or 2 fog patches in the glens, but they'll lift soon enough. And actually it's northern Scotland where we'll see the lowest temperatures first thing and then the highest temperatures by the afternoon because of the sunny skies. And we keep the sunshine there for northern Scotland for much of the day. We'll see some cloud breaks developing across northern England, southern Scotland, North Wales once again. But for the vast majority, we keep the low-lying cloud, and it's going to feel a bit colder, I think, compared with Thursday. So 10 to 13 Celsius, unless you get some sunshine, and then it's mid-teens. Into the evening, and it's more of the same effectively. One subtle difference is we'll see a bit more patchy rain arrive into the west, and actually we will see some rain crossing the country through the weekend, but that will clear the skies for Monday.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of
the latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner. Problems on the M8 to the west of Glasgow. The motorway is partly blocked westbound at junction 23, the Dunbrake Road exit where a lorry's broken down. Queues on the M1 northbound in Hertfordshire. The 2 outside lanes of 4 are shut just after junction 8. The Hemel Hempstead turn-off at the scene of a collision, queuing nearly back to the M25. On the M25, the western stretch down to a single lane clockwise